Can everyone hear me? Yes? Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Brianna Bobo, and I'm the chair for the City of St. Louis Charter Commission. I am pleased to call to order the first June bi-monthly meeting of the Charter Commission organized for and on behalf of the people of St. Louis. The time is now 4:32 p.m. We welcome the members of the public who have joined us, both in person and online. Our next agenda item includes the roll call. So Secretary Intagliata, please call the roll for the commission.
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please say present or here. Chair Bobo? Here. Vice Chair Sheridan? Parliamentarian Garth?
Here.
Commissioner Crossland?
Here.
Commissioner Dwight?
Here.
Commissioner Grant?
Present.
Commissioner Nolan Eccles? Commissioner Riley?
Present.
And Secretary Intagliata is here. We have a quorum, Madam Chair. Now I'd like to call the roll of ex officio non-voting members. The Honorable Joseph Vollmer, Alderman to Ward 5. Director Casey Milberg is designee of Mayor Tashara Jones.
Present.
Director Christine Ingrassia is designee of President Megan Green.
Present.
Special Assistant Nodrick Tankins is designee for Comptroller Darlene Green.
Present.
City Councilor Sheena Hamilton. Director Sonia Gray. Mr. Jay Kummel, Labor Representative.
Thank you, Secretary Intagliata. Draft meeting minutes from the regular meeting held on May 20th are part of the meeting documents prepared for session today, and were also provided to the commissioners in our Google Drive. So I now recognize Secretary Intagliata again for a motion regarding approval of these.
Motion to approve the May 20th meeting minutes.
Second.
Motion has been seconded. If we can call the roll. Chair Bobo?
Aye.
Vice Chair Sheridan? Parliamentarian Garth?
Aye.
Commissioner Crossland?
Aye.
Commissioner Dwight?
Aye.
Commissioner Grant?
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan Eccles? Commissioner Riley?
Aye.
And Secretary Intagliata is aye.
Excellent, thank you. Our next agenda item is a discussion of any remaining proposals from voting commissioners. At our earlier May 20th meeting, we discussed a list of proposals in order of submission. During our May 29th meeting, which was last week, midweek last week, we discussed the possibility of turning down the items we previously voted to advance for full discussion to those items that had the most cohesive support of the entire commission. We also, just as a reminder, have an agenda item dedicated to third-party proposals and an agenda item within this meeting dedicated to the Board of E&A tonight. With that in mind, and really outside of those two categories that I just named of third-party proposals and E&A, are there any commissioners who have additional proposals to put forward at this time? If so, I will allow for 10 minutes for that.
Chairperson Bobo, if I can just make a quick motion to
Sure.
suspend the rules here and make a proposal. It's sort of integrated within this item number 3, but I want to make sure at our last meeting last Wednesday, May
29th.
20, we as a commission voted to that at the meeting today, we would determine which proposals we would request the city councilor's office to draft.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like us to take those votes. I don't think it's really appropriate at item 3. I think we should probably hear through the rest of the meeting, and then, but before the conclusion of the meeting, that we take a vote on which items to submit to the city council draft.
Sure.
I make that motion.
I'll second it.
Motion has been made and seconded.
Previous roll.
Pardon me?
Previous roll,
Previous roll.
which in parliamentary procedure terms means the last time we voted, the same votes that were voted the last time applies to this vote.
Point of order.
I think you're off the hook, actually.
I'm sorry. Yes, point of order, Director Tagle.
Thank you, Commissioner Garth. You only had a roll call vote. I
Ah.
believe you can use previous rolls subsequent to the actual vote.
Fair enough.
You are back on the hook.
It looks like we will take a call. So the motion has been made and seconded by Commissioner Crossland. All those in favor say aye. Chair Bobo?
Aye.
Aye. Oh,
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Okay, the ayes have it.
So with that, we will come back to that piece. Okay. Let's see. So moving to agenda item number 4, during our May 20th meeting.
could I just raise a question, a procedural question? How would you like, Chair, how would you like to deal with the fact that we have not voted forward some items having to do with personnel and the mayoral recommendations, et cetera, that we had agreed to
I believe, is
for
that what
this
we're-
meeting?
No, and maybe my motion wasn't clear. I think we should continue the discussion right now about the pending
Right, that's
charter
what I
amendments,
was
but I think we just have
clear
to
about.
make very clear at the end of the meeting, here
Right.
are the proposals.
Okay.
here,
Yeah, that's
requesting
what
that
I wanted to
counselors
clarify.
Okay,
was
yeah.
but how would, it's long, it's 6 pages, and I know we don't want to spend our entire meeting going through this stuff in detail. And I guess my question to you and to the commission is, how would you like to review this document that I sent out this morning?
I believe it's the one that essentially went through and double-checked
Right.
Director Sonia's versus,
Well, what I did was I took the recommendations of the mayor,
Mhm.
per the report that Jared Boyd presented at our last Zoom call. Plus, I went back to the January report that Director Sonia Jenkins Gray presented to Work Group 3 before there were a lot of amendments and changes to it.
Mhm.
And I took those proposed changes and included them within this document as well. And then there were a couple of things that we had discussed over a period of time having to do with personnel that were also added in here. So it's an amalgam of all 3 of those items.
Let's take about 10 minutes to discuss that now.
Okay, what I think I'll try to do, and stop me if there's anything that you want to spend more detailed time on, but what I'll try to do is hit some of the high notes as I understand them in terms of why certain recommendations got made by either of those individuals and then by us. Does that make sense to people?
Yep.
Yes, Commissioner Intagliata?
Commissioner, I think with all due respect, what would probably be helpful is if you just gave us a single sentence on each of the recommendations and then saw if anybody needs further explanation. Might move us along.
Well, I was going to, actually, each of them, some of them are simply grammatical or obsolete or statements like that, and I propose I skip those for the sake of
Okay.
time, because it's specified in here what those documents are, what those items are, and I will simply do what you're suggesting with anything where there's possible action, okay?
Okay.
All right. So if we were to look then at this, the major, at the last meeting, there was discussion about how the disability, both temporary and permanent disability, in the current charter was not clear. This is language that is proposed by the mayor following the 25th Amendment. I will leave it at that. Looking then down here, probably the most significant change as we get into Article 8 has to do with the change in 3 positions, where the mayor proposes that those positions, which are already part of her cabinet, be actually direct appointments and terminations by her with just cause, obviously. And those three positions are the personnel director, the police commissioner, and the fire commissioner. Right now, the personnel director is hired by the mayor based on a list that's given to her by the Civil Service Commission, but she is not able to terminate. And so even with just cause, there's a very narrow definition of how you can terminate, and malfeasance, misfeasance, etc. The police commissioner and the fire commissioner both report to the director of public safety, and through that individual to the mayor. And instead, it makes more sense and is more parallel to how other cities operate to have those two positions actually report directly to the mayor. Moving on then to section 12 here. That's a question mark. I'm going to leave that for now. The language is arcane and perhaps doesn't say what it needs to say, but let's not get into the discussion of that right now. The problem is this is about people who don't work full-time in their position. And they define certain positions like members of the Board of Aldermen and the mayor, et cetera, is not working right now full-time. And so we do have to look at that, but we won't look at it right now. Moving on then, there is an issue of the fire marshal. That section, fire marshal no longer exists as an independent entity because it's now been folded into the police department because of local control issues. But there needs to be some sort of a clause included in there so that should in the future we not have local control again, then there would be an option to reinstate that position. Moving along then to public safety, those are simply changes in language because of changes in how the city operates, and the request to add departments and programs that have developed since the charter was written. Department of Finance, we have discussed this first one already about raising the limit on being on purchases, and what it's saying here is that it should be set by ordinance as opposed to a specific amount that's included within the charter. The recommendation is to set it by ordinance and to adjust it annually for inflation. Public printing and publishing, obviously the issue there is that it doesn't provide for any kind of electronic transmissions. We no longer have 2 daily newspapers, etc. That needs to be updated. Now we move into civil service then, and the civil service, which is the last section of this document. And the major changes then here really fall into a couple of areas. One we discussed already, and I think decided to agreed to move forward, and that has to do with adopting language access processes for limited English proficient job applicants. We addressed that last time. When we get down here to section commission powers and duties, some of this is pretty straightforward, but section 8 then. Director of Personnel, Human Services, Appointment, Qualifications, Compensation. The way that it's currently stated, one of the big changes here has to do with the job description for the position of personnel director. Right now, muni government experience is required. At least 2 years of muni government experience is required of the personnel director, which limits the pool significantly. You could be the HR director of Centene Corporation and not qualify to be director of personnel in the city of St. Louis because of the muni requirement that's here. And so Director Jenkins Gray has suggested that that be removed, the muni service requirement, and has made a suggestion in terms of the types of experience that the personnel director would benefit from having in that position. I have also talked with Jared Boyd, who thinks that the description actually makes sense, and so there appears not to be a conflict in terms of the mayor's office with that change. The next change then where is significant within this area has to do then with Section 9, where it's director's powers and duties, generally with removal for office. This is also a major area of change then. And here what it has to do with is that in the current system, the personnel director is subject to civil service and can only be dismissed by the Civil Service Commission for a very narrow a set of reasons, including malfeasance, misfeasance, and some others. We propose in this document to set that position up to be parallel then to other cabinet positions where that individual could be dismissed by the mayor for just cause. Then, once again, the rest of this stuff, I'm looking here to see if there's anything else that is all that I do not see anything else here then that rises to the level I would think of having conversations about them, but I will pause for a moment and ask the other commissioners if there's any questions or items that they would like to raise questions about right now.
So, Commissioner Krause, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So I'm looking at what you distributed on page 1, Article 8, Section 1, on the article on city officers and employees, right?
Uh-huh.
And it says the mayor shall appoint the following officers at his convenience,
Uh-huh.
which typically means that you can remove them at their convenience.
Right.
And then it lists a whole bunch of people, and then you add the personnel director. Does that mean then, but you're also saying the personnel director could only be removed for cause?
Well, no, all of them can only be removed for cause. If you look at the description here of the positions, they can appoint at their convenience. The mayor can appoint at their convenience, but they can only remove for just cause. And that's the case with
'Cause I
all of the,
Term convenience to mean something different.
well, convenience means that every time that the mayor, every 4-year cycle, basically the person who's in the role of director of whatever of these defined organizations, automatically their term, if you want to call it that, expires, and the mayor, but they continue in that term. This is the way I understand, at least it works presently in City Hall. They can continue in that role until someone else is appointed or they are reappointed.
Okay.
And so it happens every 4 years. And so the personnel director would follow that same cycle. The difference is, in the case of the personnel director, the mayor would not be able to simply hire anyone, but would have to replace or hire from a list that was given to the mayor by the Civil Service Commission.
So my next question is, I just see too in this Article 8, Section 1, you add some including the superintendent of schools.
That was,
I don't think the mayor can appoint the superintendent of schools.
well, that may be an error then. Excuse me, I may have misheard something that the mayor said during her presentation, because I thought that she said, maybe what she said was the superintendent of schools, though, is a member of her cabinet. She may not appoint that individual, but that individual is a member of her cabinet. That's where I think the confusion lies. So I stand corrected on that one, yes.
Commissioner Crossland
Uh-huh.
raised a couple questions, and thank you for
Sure.
your presentation. So on the first line item where you talked about that the mayor has the authority, or would have the authority to both hire and terminate, what was that again? It was the HR personnel and.
Yeah, it is currently titled the Personnel Department and the Director of Personnel, although these recommendations, rename it the HR director and the HR department.
So the only thing that I kind of caution on that is the optics of that would seem that the office of the mayor, or rather that an executive would have a little bit more added power than need be to hire and or fire people. It's one of the main reasons why most executive branch officers normally have a chief of staff to avoid things such as conflict of interest and things of that nature. So just optically, and even with just from a general public point of view, if the mayor has that kind of power, or any kind of executive has that kind of power, that could cause some
Yeah, I see.
issue there.
I see what you're saying, and I agree with it to an extent. The flip side of it, though, is that along with the ability to make that appointment comes a greater responsibility, and also a better, more accountability.
Right.
And so it is easier then to be able to tie things that do and don't happen to an individual because of that chain of responsibility not being layered quite the way it is now. So there are pluses and minuses to both directions, but it appears, at least from the research that that other cities, the personnel director, if there is not a manager or that individual reports to the mayor. And so the layer of having civil service the way we do is actually the unusual way to do it, as opposed to the usual way to do it.
The other point of note is I believe that the mayor already has the authority to appoint a chief of police, from my understanding.
With the public
Okay,
service.
so that's
Yep. Yeah.
those are just some things that were just kind of just coming to my attention, because it was just kind of like,
Yeah.
well, the proposal almost kind of seems like it gives more broader powers,
Right.
and I know that that may violate a little bit of checks and balances.
Well, and you're right. What it is doing is formalizing some processes and relationships that have developed in certain ways. And we also are somewhat unusual here in St. Louis in terms of having our police chief report to the mayor through a director of public safety who might in fact not even have police experience. And so it's one more layer and not necessarily something that may create as much value as we think.
Fair enough.
Commissioner Dwight, did you have a question?
I think it was similarly on the same line of questioning. Personally, I don't have a problem with the chief of police or the fire. I wonder, is there any middle ground on personnel? I agree that it should be changed from the current system, and the mayor should have more direct hiring ability. I wonder if there's some check in there about like a nomination that then
Well, let me
approval
clarify.
from the city council or something like that, where they still have those increased firing powers, but there's some check on
Yeah.
nomination.
Let me just clarify that there isn't a change in the hiring process. Currently, the mayor selects the personnel director from a list, the way that the mayor will continue to do so under the new process. The change actually has to do with the mayor's ability to terminate the individual rather than that going through civil service. And the removal of the previous criteria for termination, which, as I said, were very narrow, and making it equal to the termination criteria of other cabinet members, which is just cause.
That's a helpful distinction. So it's just to make sure I understand, it's the firing conditions that have changed, but the hiring process is
Right.
the same.
Right, right. Yeah, there would still be oversight of the hiring process in terms of recommendations to her, top 3 candidates. The difference there will be that the job description also for that individual will be broader. So the pool of candidates for the position may in fact be more competitive than perhaps it's been in some years.
Any other discussion around this?
Just a question.
Go ahead. Yeah.
The Commissioner, are there specific recommendations you want us to consider and make a motion to consider and vote on?
I would recommend that all of the recommendations in here be adopted as stated. Well, I would recommend that all of the recommendations in here be moved forward as stated, because we're not adopting at this point.
Right.
Yeah, that what we are doing is we are deciding which ones move forward into the next batch. And all of these have sufficient merit to move forward to the next batch. That's why they're here.
So it's my understanding that the next step is the things that we decide and vote on go to the city councilor for ordinance language.
Well, and that's where Commissioner Grant's motion a couple minutes ago matters, because both at the last meeting and at this meeting, we're going to be deciding to move things forward, but then we're going to vote on what goes to the city councilor at the end. Because things are going to have merit, but we may have to decide how many of them go forward and how many of them don't. You know, we went through a large adoption process last time, in fact, of a number of different recommendations. And then we have more tonight, and then we've got to figure out how to be able to put this all together into a set of recommendations that we ask the city councilor then
But it was
staff to
my
articulate.
last week that many of the items had already been drafted. So anything new, we had to let them know in this meeting so that they could draft
Right.
it. But this would be the end of it.
Right. This meeting will be the end of it. That's my understanding also.
The end of it meaning the draft that we are required to
Correct.
put forward.
Thank you for that
And
clarification.
then we will have a public forum on, and then we'll have one more meeting
Right. So can you
before it goes to the ballot
just, yes,
or
thank
to
you.
the city Board of Alders.
Thank you, Commissioner Dwight. Can you restate your motion then, Commissioner Crossland?
I make a motion that we move the recommendations in this document forward to the next step.
Just towards the next step.
Yeah. Well, because
But
we're going to
that's the next
decide.
step.
That's the next
We
step.
have to have,
Next step.
All right, then we've got to say for drafting by the city council. I mean, I'm fine to accept a friendly emotion if that's what we need to say.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
but can we do, pursuant to my earlier motion, can't we do this at the very end instead of piecemealing which ones we're going to submit to the city council?
May I make a
So you're
suggestion?
recommending that we review the ENA as well?
Director,
Here's my concern. The city councilor's office has informed us they have limited resources to draft these proposals over the next 2 weeks. And so we need to have a comprehensive understanding of what we're submitting to the city councilor to see if it can get done. You know,
I
so don't want to
agree, yeah.
piecemeal it, you know, so I think we need to hear everything.
okay.
That's,
So we should go ahead and we should, at this point, I can withdraw my motion.
Yeah.
We can go ahead and hear the ENA stuff, and then we can decide what we're going to forward at that point. I'm okay with that, yeah. Okay.
Also, Director Ingracia.
Thank you, Chair Bobo. I was going to say something similar to Commissioner Grant, and I would also maybe inquire of the City Councilor's Office representation that's here this evening to make sure that whatever you decide you would like to request drafted, they have time to do so before that June 14th deadline.
Okay, thank you. So I think with that, we can move to the next item. Also, I want to quickly mention that our vice chair is online. So the next part of our meeting this afternoon is to discuss third-party proposals. During our May 20th meeting, when planning this particular meeting's agenda, I stated that the commission would hold space to discuss third-party proposals for charter amendments, which have been circulated among commissioners. So we will have the opportunity to advance third-party proposals if anyone chooses. What I'm going to do is quickly call on each commissioner, and you will have the floor to bring up or elevate any third-party proposal that you wish. And again, just kind of bearing in mind the timing of our comments to allow for the remaining agenda items. So with that, Vice Chair Sheridan.
Nothing to move forward.
Thank you. Secretary Intagliata.
Nothing to move forward.
Thank you. Parliamentarian Dwight, or Parliamentarian Garth.
No, I haven't.
Commissioner Dwight.
It's related to the E&A proposals about the public advocate. So it's not really a new proposal. It's more of a slight change to that. That included within the public advocate's duties would be an Office of Community Engagement
Okay. Commissioner Crossland.
within the public advocate's agency.
So it will be addressed later.
Yes.
Okay.
Nothing more to move forward.
Okay. Commissioner, did I already call Commissioner Grant?
So I think, yeah, we'll review. I just want to make sure we're talking about outside third-party.
Right, right. Things that were
I
submitted
mean, we
to.
have, just so, there have been, we have, besides all the other proposals related to budgeting, E&A, public advocate.
Correct.
The Department of Transportation, there has been, it's in the packet, a more detailed proposal, which is, I hope people had a chance to look at, which does include this more holistic vision of the Department of Transportation, but would also, it makes clear that that department will have the ability to do planning and even some engineering and be able to let contracts, which is currently done through the Board of Public Service. So they're actually a subdivision of the Board of Public Service, but they would actually have more independent authority to do contracting. So that, I just want to make people aware of that.
I had one more thing. I'm so
Okay.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I did mention it because I thought maybe we had already approved it, but we might not have. But we had a few people testify to us and also had language delivered about issues with civilian oversight, both of correctional facilities as well as police, and that there was a proposal submitted about that by John Chasnoff and supported by others. Has that been considered so far?
I don't know that we've discussed it in depth. So you can have a few minutes to, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So it should be within everybody's drive, but it was submitted by CAPCAR, the Coalitions Against Police Crimes and Repression. And I think we had a few speakers across time that supported the need for it, and it was even echoed in the public advocate testimony of the public advocate from New York. But just, it states that the current St. Louis City Charter has to date greatly inhibited the functioning of these oversight entities. The language gives authority over them to the city councilor, but we've talked previously, not any fault of the city councilor, but there is just an inherent kind of conflict there with protection of the city, which often means not considering lawsuits against police officers or other misconduct that may be happening within jails or policing. And so this would help create definitions as well as address those conflict of interests to allow for that oversight board to have that independent legal counsel that it needs. I believe as well as some subpoena power.
I'm trying to remember because this has some impact. Well, the discussion about the Board of the Office of Public Advocate has some impact on this because I know that some of our discussions focused on some of these oversight boards actually their authority being transferred to the Public Advocate's Office to remove some of the conflict that we were talking about. And so they're kind of tied together because you might go one direction if we're not going with the Public Advocate's Office and another direction if we are.
I think the relevance of the language is important, whether it's in under the public advocate or whether it's continues to be under the Department of Public Safety. And so in that way, it's a little bit independent, and I don't know that I don't think it's been included in our E&A light and heavy reforms. So I think it merits maybe its own approval, and we know that it might exist in different spaces, depending.
What's the title of that document?
Statement to City Charter Commission, CAPCAR statement.
Do we have to advance the entire proposal?
What date?
Take parts of it.
I'm looking it up in the drive now. We can, I think, do whatever we want in terms of what we think the appropriate change is.
Are you asking that because you'd like pieces of it, or?
Yeah, so overall, based upon testimony we've heard from the city attorney as well as the public advocate from New York, I do not think it's in the city's best interest to allow each department to have their own legal counsel. And so I think that piece I would strike personally in terms of my vote, but subpoena power having additional authority there I think is helpful.
Yeah, so this language, I could read the language.
Please.
So this is specifically in Article 10, Section 2. They would say any division of city government and any boards or commissions that are tasked with the functions of providing independent oversight shall be exempt from the provisions of this section. That's a section that's about the city councilor representing. Members of such divisions of city government, boards, or commissions shall not be represented by the city councilor in lawsuits, nor shall be advised by the city councilor unless they formally request such services from the city councilor. If so requested, the city councilor shall render such services. If no such request is issued, such divisions of city government, boards, or commissions are authorized to hire independent counsel and shall have the authority to enter into contracts securing the services of the independent counsel of their choice. So it's meant to be more targeted specifically to things like the DCO, Division of Civilian Oversight, which contains the Detention Facilities Oversight Board and the Civilian Oversight Board. So if we wanted to make it more specific, sure, I think it's meant to be a little more catch-all in case the public advocate has that independent oversight function. Would you, if it specified a little bit more specifically, Commissioner Riley, would you see that as like assuaging your concerns?
I don't think so. I think at the end of the day, there's one opinion for the city. And so to have each body having any type of independent counsel or input, I think divides the city's opinion. And we see in New York, it hasn't been helpful to the city. I don't think we should do it.
I totally want to hear others. I would just offer like having done like 10 years of research in this space of police accountability, like this is the best practice to allow for other counsel because of that inherent conflict of interest with cities that then often protect police officers that may have done misconduct on citizens. And I think the current state of affairs has really hampered and in fact like stalled to a halt any efforts to actually do oversight. And that's like one of the key areas. I think in the case of New York, it's not because they have this ability, it's actually because it doesn't go far enough in New York, actually, that they're not able to pursue it fully.
Is there any further discussion on this?
I would ask for a motion from Commissioner Dwight regarding the proposal that you're speaking to.
Absolutely. I move for the proposal that I've just read, submitted to the Charter Commission to be included in what we're considering to send to the counselor. Or to approve it. I'm happy to go either way.
So I will note, there's a variation of what you're talking about already in the public advocate proposal. Now, what you're saying is a little different. So
Yeah.
I just want to point that out, like it's in there. Like there's a provision in the public advocate that says provide legal staff and legal support and/or sue in the name of the city's oversight boards and commissions, including the Civilian Oversight Board and Detention Facilities Oversight Board, in order to protect their functions and independence. Now,
It does, and I think without this additional language,
got it.
it's not
Yeah.
functional.
Yeah, my only question is that I thought earlier we had said we were going to listen to all of the proposals to make a motion and forward ones.
So I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay. So we'll move to Commissioner Nolan Eccles. If you have any third party.
Yes, I want to gain clarity. What Commissioner Crossland just said was related to the last agenda item, or is it referring to this current agenda item?
In regards to,
In regards to what we're continuing to motion on? Yes. So are we on the third-party proposals and determining which ones are moving forward? Or are we applying what we just applied to agenda item number 3 to agenda item number 4 as well?
I think what I'm understanding is there was just a request for the order of things, that because we really want to have a final motion that includes everything that we're sending forward in our draft that we're required to submit, that we vote at the end of proposing all the things, is my understanding.
yeah, based on, I think Commissioner Grant's earlier motion. So we're just going to do it towards the end. So do you have third-party proposals to discuss?
I do. I want to discuss all of the public's proposals that are listed for us to have reviewed. And I believe the date goes back to January 22nd, in which the first member of the public submitted a article recommendation. So that's why I asked the clarifying question before I started. So are we postponing the motions for moving items forward to the end? Okay, so then I will refrain until the end of the agenda regarding the proposals that I want to have a motion on related to the public.
Okay, Commissioner Riley?
No.
Okay, thank you, commissioners.
Is it now the time to present them, though?
It is the time to present them. I don't think she wants to, it seems.
No, that's why I'm asking clarification. Are we motioning to move forward the third-party recommendations?
We're discussing them.
Okay.
So you can discuss them now.
Okay, so I will go through them and discuss them. On our list of recommendations we've gotten from the public, at the very beginning of receiving recommendations, we have Malik Lindell, I believe, that provided us with a recommendation as follows. Currently, we do not have a Department of Transportation, but we have a lot of transportation-related issues. I believe we're covering this recommendation in a proposal we've already voted to put forth. So I wanted to make sure for the record that that was communicated to the public, that this recommendation has been considered and voted to move forward, so I can move forward to the next recommendation.
Point of clarity, which document are you referencing? I want to make sure I'm following where you are.
The Charter Commission staff has provided us with a Google Drive of all public amendment submissions by way of form from the website, and I don't believe they're printed
Not this, and it's
here, but they are in our drive,
Okay,
and they're not on our combined recommendations either.
and it's not.
Do you mind What's the title of that document?
It's called Proposed Public Amendment Submission Forms. It's a spreadsheet.
Where is that?
It's in our Google Drive.
I'm looking at, is this third-party amendments?
No, is it in the third-party amendment section? I'm not sure if yes. So it says third-party amendment proposals. And it's the only spreadsheet in that folder. It's all of the PDFs above it are also recommendations that came by way of the.
You can continue.
Thank you. The second proposal that came to us is also related to the Department of Transportation, which we've also already considered, so I'll move past that one. The third one is also related to the Department of Transportation, so I will move past that one. The fifth item from the public's amendments are related to creating a land value tax that I think that we should consider, related to member of the public, Michael J. Vaughn. And I believe this is also Michael J. Vaughn's recommendation related to forestry, the same land value tax update. The seventh item from the public that I would like for us to continue for discussion is item number 7, 8, and 9, or 7 and 8 from Nancy Thompson, related to the consideration of amending the charter by stating that all county offices, except that of the circuit attorney, are abolished. And you all can read the remainder of that document. She also has a supporting document within the third-party recommendations. From Charles Bryson, there is a recommendation to change this is moving my screen. Okay, also related to the Department of Transportation. Item number 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 are from Nancy Thompson, related to the articles pertaining to the Board of Aldermen, the City Council, the Mayor's Office, the Department of Transportation, Article 18, the Personnel Department, the Personnel Department, the Personnel Department, the City Attorney, the Board of Aldermen, the Comptroller's Office, and the City Administrator and City Manager. Items number 21 are related to pay parity and removing pay parity from the charter, from Joe Steiger and the St. Louis Police Officers Association. Items number 22 is related to the Personnel Department, from Daniel, it looks like, from Daniel. Item number 23, which is the last one, is from Benjamin Singer, related to implementing approval voting, followed by a runoff that would increase consistency. And I believe that we have made a change regarding the voting and elections process. But I would like for us to also consider the elections for county offices and the last recommendation, item number 23. So we have 23 recommendations by way of the website for members from the public on amendments to the charter, as well as supporting documents that look like 12 supporting items to those articles. And the reason why I read those items the rationale for reading those items is I believe that all perspectives and recommendations from all members of the public should in fact be considered, and later on in the agenda when we get there, to move them further to discussion for the July 1st public hearing. Thank you.
All right, so our next agenda item is a discussion of certain proposals from commissioners and work groups regarding the Board of Estimate and Apportionment. Commissioners Dwight, Garth, and Grant, would you please summarize the different proposals?
So I don't think there's too much more to add here than what we've spoken about at multiple meetings so far and distributed. There are essentially 4 options that have been circulated, reviewed, discussed, and which I think we'll vote on later, but I think we should have ready for drafting, which are variations of types of reforms, which would be option 1, which is a very simple proposal to give the Board of Aldermen's budgeting authority, which would also need to include not only in development of the budget, but supplementals during the fiscal year in order to fund programs. Option number 2 would be a more a broader type of proposal that would eliminate the Board of Estimate and Apportionment. And that would essentially give the budgeting process, set a new budgeting process with greater involvement by the Board of Alderpeople through drafts created by the budget director, which would then go to the Board of Alderpersons for review, passage as an ordinance, could be modified, new items added, new items deleted, and then would be approved by the mayor, just like, or vetoed by the mayor. And that would also require, because of the Board of E&A's involvement in essentially review of contracts to make sure that money exists to pay for a contract, but also we would need to determine or give some authority either to the comptroller or the budget director to ensure that money exists to pay on contracts. Option number 3 would be just a freestanding creation of a public advocate position. That's been, that's very detailed in the handouts that have been distributed. That would essentially serve as an ombudsman for investigation of complaints related to civil services, as well as various services or duties related to increasing civic engagement, handling sunshine requests, having subpoena power to audit various city departments to ensure proper spending, and we had talked before about providing legal staff and support for various independent commissions. Then option 4 would be sort of the consolidated large option, which would eliminate E&A, create the public advocate, which would then phase out the comptroller and allocate those duties to essentially a finance director under the mayor, which would perform the ministerial functions associated with the comptroller's office currently, for instance, drawing on accounts, making sure money's in accounts, so on and so forth. So that's all been distributed. I don't think there's really any more to say about it.
And under the final option, who would assure that money is available for contracts? Would that be the budget director then?
It would be,
No, it would be a finance director.
Okay, direct appointed by the mayor.
Within the mayor, there'd be like a department under the mayor or under the mayor, for which there'd be a finance Director. Essentially, what you have in the budget would be you have these line items that show money for each spending down to great detail, and the Finance Director would ensure that there was money to pay out.
And then, under that scenario, the public advocate would take over audit functions, I'm assuming?
Some of the auditing and financial review functions of the comptroller.
Okay, thank you.
Now, I'll just say this, I think these are all, there's great debate about these proposals, but I think I'll go back to this when we talk about which proposals to advance for drafting. I think we should try to maximize what the public has as an option. We have a duty to publish these by June 14th. So I think we should try to present as if there's a legitimate basis and we've fully vetted these proposals, I think we should draft them and then get the public's input on them.
And Commissioner, how long would the phase-out period between comptroller and public advocate be?
The proposal, the consolidated proposal on option 4 would dissolve E&A at the beginning of January of next year, would establish the Department of Finance at that time. At that time, would also, on January 1, 2025, would essentially rename the Office of Comptroller as Comptroller and Public Advocate, and then would, over the next 4 years, shift those functions, phase out the comptroller's functions and shift them either to the Finance Department or to the Public Advocate. So it's a long, the proposal is a long phase-in.
Yeah. And
When would
Commissioner
the
Grant?
election for public advocate be then, under that scenario?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Would the public advocate would be an elected position?
A full city elected position.
And when would that person be elected then, following the November of the even
Be
year?
elected at the same time as the mayor and subject to removal or recall on the same basis as a mayor. And,
Thank you.
And if there was a vacancy, same thing.
Great.
Commissioner Grant, under your proposal 4, where would the budget director be placed, since now that position, I think, is within the E&A,
Under the mayor,
under the mayor?
which is kind of,
Okay.
the budget director's only reference right now at one time. Right now, the city charter only makes one reference to the budget director, but which is in the provision on E&A. But I believe, someone correct me wrong, I don't know if Mr. Payne sort of operates independently or is under the mayor's office right now, or?
No, he's independent of the mayor's office, from what I understand. That's why I was asking.
I see Casey and Christine sort of nodding. so
No, I mean, funding-wise, he falls under the comptroller's office, remember, but it does not operate. I mean, he operates in the mayor's office.
Commissioner Grant, one thing, you mentioned that this would begin, I think it was option 4 or 3 would also begin right around about January of 2025, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
So my concern about that proposal is that that's right at the height of the mayoral and comptroller election. So that would be a really major change at a most peculiar time.
That's an interesting point. Of course, I know there's another proposal out there to shift elections from the spring calendar to the November calendar.
Correct.
But that's an interesting point. You're right. I mean, that's one of the problems with budgeting. Like, what this process, first of all, this, this idea of like making this change, but then also part of budgeting, that all of this is occurring right during the election season, which creates complications.
Correct. And I mean, like, and that's one thing, for all 9 of us to consider is that, I mean, we were brought together more or less right in between 2 major election cycles. Of course, we have the presidential this year, but then we also have a couple of county offices that come due in August. And then literally, like, right after August, if And I know that there is a person here that knows all about the election process here in the city. It's a fun time for everybody, and I use that word fun very lightly. But I'm just saying that it may cause a little bit of unsettledness to be moving all those parts so quickly going into a major election year.
Well, we would set that timeline. We could simply suggest a 2026, 27. We can sunset that when we choose, right? It doesn't have to be January 25. It can be 26, 27, whatever we decide.
If I may, I think on anything you're considering, although I completely understand the sense of urgency for reform, just realistically, when making such a big change, it may take more time than a January 2025 deadline.
Yeah, I think what we have to remember is it's not just the amendments in the charter, but it's going to be the ordinance that also are going to have to drastically change. And so we're going to have to rely on experts to help us understand how massive that process might be in order to set a realistic deadline.
So if I could add to that, I want to make sure we understand that this commission was put together to create and establish change. So it's just for us to determine what changes or which change should occur. The deadlines and timelines and the fact that things are going to happen later or how they happen is inevitable for every change that we're going to make. So I think the changes that we are looking to make that would make the best and the best interest, or that's in the best interest of the city, is what we should be considering, regardless of the time that it takes or the impact that it may have on the current structure. As we found throughout this entire process, the structure of the city of St. Louis needs to be addressed. And if we're not making changes to address the structure and the current system and infrastructure of the city, then our recommendations are just bubble gum and tape to the problems. So we probably should be considering the recommendations that we've made and that have been provided to us that require some drastic change.
Is there additional conversation that needs to be had around this specific proposal, understanding that we're going to address it a little bit later as well?
I will just say, let me chime in and say, to agree with my fellow commissioner, there is going to be no convenient time for any of these changes to take place.
True.
That's all.
Okay, so moving on to our next agenda item, at the request of Secretary Intagliata is a discussion around public survey and polling. To recap where we are, during our January 8th meeting, the commission voted to request $40,000 for community engagement. And then in a subsequent meeting, February 2nd, a memorandum to the commission, Charter Commission staff advised that the budget director, Paul Payne, had requested a transfer of $25,000 as an initial amount and recommended that the commission discuss the precise items for how we would spend or allocate those funds, and then follow the executive committee to approve a scope of work if the commission wanted to engage. So it is now June 3rd, and the commission has voted to hold its final public hearing in July, on July 1, and finalize our submissions to the Board of Aldermen on July 8th. So just wanted to give that as context. Secretary Intagliata, you have the floor.
When would the board be finished with their deliberations and have a final bill or final passage?
I don't know how to answer that question. We did have a discussion today about the possibility of setting up a timeline. I requested that aldermen reach out to me and let me know if there are any dates that they are not available to meet. If you'll remember, the board typically breaks July 12th, and so we want to make sure we have quorum. So I will have some better information on that within the next couple of days, but I think the idea is that we would hope to do it after July, just to keep going into July.
And so So maybe a better way is to figure out what's the date we can't go past, the board can't go past.
They have to have well, the mayor has to sign the bill or bills if they get passed. And then we have to get an ordinance number from the register, and then that has to be sent to the Board of Elections no later than August 27th.
Okay. Thank you
Sure.
for that. Okay, so that changes the idea of having a survey for ballot strategy, which I think all of us have seen some wisdom for. Ben Singer from Show Me Integrity spent a great deal of time. We may not have the ability to get an RFP, get it written, sent out, responded to, and approved in the time frame that the findings, and then of course the survey fielded and the results compiled, to advise the board over the most effective ballot structure. If we could do all those things, I would say that it would be well worth our time and effort, and probably the most efficient and important use of the $40,000 that we have set aside for this issue. However, I'm not sure that all of the steps that I motioned would, or that I referenced, could be done in that time frame. However, what I would like to put forward is a conditional motion, if possible, to say if an RFP could be drawn, fielded, responded to, and approved, and part of the request that I would add to the scope of work that I put here is that it would have to be expedited by the pollster as well. So don't apply if you're not able to field a responsible data sample, conduct the survey, and come up with findings on a very, very quick basis. I'm sure that a number of pollsters would be happy to take on that challenge. I'm not sure if the city can do the RFP process quickly enough to make sense of it.
I think one of the biggest challenges you'll have is not necessarily, because the city councilor's office will have to call for a selection committee, which is made up of 5 members. And then the RFP, there's no requirement that it be posted for a certain amount of time. You could do a quick turnaround time if you only wanted to do a week or something like that. And then the committee could make the decision on the respondents. But where things always seem to get mucked up, and luckily we do have a representative from the comptroller's office here, is in that next step piece of ensuring that the vendor has everything that they need to have in order for a contract to be approved, and then for the comptroller's office to approve everything and get that vendor paid after E&A approves it.
And Commissioner, if those 5 selectees could make a decision, I'm assuming that there's precedent for the comptroller's office to expedite the contract, correct? I believe they've done so in the past.
I believe you're correct in thinking that.
Great. So, thank you. So, given that it sounds like we can expedite an RFP and a selection process of 5 judges and contract work at the comptroller's office, I would highly recommend that we move forward and have an RFP for that survey put together and enacted, all on an expedited basis.
Commissioner Intagliata, so that I can, in my mind, understand, are we aiming to have the results in hand in order to make our decisions on July the 8th?
On July the 8th. No, it would be advisory, I think, under this scenario for the alders to say, here's the most effective
Okay.
way to structure the ballot.
All right, so we would be moving forward on July the 8th without benefit of this information. It would be for the alders later on,
And
which lengthens the time frame a little bit on it.
But I thought, I wasn't at the last meeting, but I watched it, that we were going to submit a letter to the alders imploring them to respect the original intent of the ordinance and charter language and to take what we put forward and put it on the ballot without change, respecting the intent of the original process. So that feels like in conflict with that. Like, I'd love it if we were able to react to it, but I don't know, I think that invites in
I also
a lot.
Well, I mean, what we don't want to do is do a survey that has absolutely no use or take-up, right?
Well, that's why I was asking for clarification, because it seems to me, and what makes me concerned is the place where we really need the data is to make the decisions on July the 8th. And so and I worry then about that time frame.
So my question is, July 1st is the public hearing, correct? July 8th is when we submit to the Board of Aldermen for them to complete, or for us to submit to the Board of Aldermen. Wouldn't the polling take place either prior to and including the July 1st public hearing?
The polling could take place anytime after it's awarded, but there are certain steps a pollster is going to have to do. They're going to, have to have a data sample, be able to move through it. I'm assuming we'd want some input into the survey document itself. All of those things can be done, but we are now a month and 3 days away from that. So that is a tight timeline. We do have an expert in the audience. And if it's okay with the chair, could we call on Ben Singer to give us a professional opinion on timeline, possible timelines for pollsters?
So I do have on our agenda public comment, and his name is
Okay,
on.
very good.
So
All right.
Can we also add to the RFP the deadline that we're working with and ask what they can do well based upon our needs in that timeline?
Yeah, we would have to. So all of this would have to be expedited, or you wouldn't apply
Sure.
to do it, right?
But we need a time frame in your motion.
Right.
So what the city council's office likes to ask us is make sure we have the dates and time frames in the motions so that they can complete the actions by then.
I really would love the info from a poll to incorporate, but I'm looking at the calendar and it looks like there's 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm not as much of an expert, but I've been part of campaigns that did polling, and it's really hard for me to imagine the RFP, submitting it, doing all of the internal processes, and then they'd have a week and a half, a week to turn, and that you can't create a polling instrument and analyze it in that time.
Yeah.
I agree, actually. Yeah, I'm concerned about the timeline and it being crunched, and then that creating a problem when it comes to gathering useful data. So,
Madam Chair,
Well,
Yes.
I mean, the timeline now with the Board of Aldermen almost is near impossible. So,
Director Ingracia?
thank you, Madam Chair. If it's helpful to the commissioners, I would be happy to help strategize a different plan. I mean, there's outreach to alderpersons on a regular basis for a wide variety of board bills that don't include polling. So if there's another avenue with which to engage those, I mean, that's something that we were already planning on doing anyway in terms of strategy.
And that's our next agenda item. So would you like to make a motion or?
Yes, so, well, I guess the motion is I'd like Commissioner Ingracia to explore the timeline. Is the board going to be open to accepting our thoughts on ballot language and strategy as a whole?
I think it's definitely worth having a cohesive plan to approach elected officials. I also think, just sort of anecdotally, based on my experience serving on the board for 10 years, that there's typically two schools of thought with respect to putting something on the ballot. One is individuals who will say we should just put it on the ballot and let the voters decide, and then individuals who are just so vehemently against whatever change is being proposed that they don't even want to give the voters the chance. And so I think those are conversations that we need to start having. And within that also comes, like, do you submit your recommendations individually or as one document with all of the recommendations as the board bill?
I would also like to just kind of go back to defer what you said. I mean, we do have an expert here in our audience today that would probably glean more insight on that he has more expertise on knowing how long it would turn around. It's my understanding that you can actually get some polstering done in under a week. But of course, I think that Ben Singer would be able to best explain that to us. So I would probably I would want to hold until we hear from him.
Fair enough. Good.
Okay, so that leads us to our next agenda item, which is discussion around expanding community engagement. Commissioner Dwight, I'll yield the floor to you.
I'm catching up on new information that we learned last week that I wasn't here for, that severely expedites our process. So it really seems like focusing on activation towards, have we decided on a final date for the town hall, but really activating towards that town hall and really like creating a good environment for that town hall would be most important.
Okay.
We have a date selected for it.
I believe July 1st.
It is the final date.
Yeah, I think I understand at least that it's July the 1st. They're not firmed up on the location yet,
Right.
but that
We don't
it's
have
July
the
the
location
1st.
information yet.
Okay.
It just doesn't work in terms of the sequence otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so with that, I think are you good to, okay. So I think with that, we'll move to public comment.
Well, sorry, on that note,
on that piece.
the town hall, I don't have anything else. But I have one other space, which is that actually Benjamin Singer is here as well, because Show Me Integrity we've talked a lot as a commission about just how dense, even understanding what the purpose of a charter is, let alone to think about what changes to it are needed, and that it actually takes, a lot of communications insight to be able to communicate that to people. They've created a guide around the city charter that could be used, and they're willing to kind of gift it to the commission to use as a tool, and I think could especially be helpful, if we're still doing our kind of going out to the neighborhood meetings to invite people to July 1st, and then could be a helpful tool there as well. So I was actually also going to ask if we could have like 2-3 minutes for him to present
Sure.
this agenda item.
Mm-hmm.
So just going back to the July 3rd date.
First.
July
July 1st.
1st is the date. Okay. All right, that's our public hearing date.
Yeah, and I would really push that we have it in the just for accessibility,
Yes.
instead of like 4:30, like a little bit later, like 6.
So this is a guide based upon what we'll vote on today.
This is a guide that we've essentially been gifted based on what we've pulled together thus far.
Yeah. And we have the person here who can explain it more.
Right, but I'm asking, so once we vote tonight on what to advance, this will have to be changed to adapt to what we want to push forward. Okay.
Yes.
Yes, please.
I'll be brief. I know you have very important business tonight. Thank you, esteemed commission members. On behalf of Show Me Integrity, we are presenting you with a draft booklet that explains the commission's current recommendations and why they are needed, and asks for public feedback via an online survey that is linked from the QR codes and URLs. This is different from what a scientific poll would be. We are presenting this to this Charter Commission in case you may find it helpful with public engagement. We can also create shorter materials in the future that you can use. We know that the Charter Commission's recommendations are still in flux and evolving and are not finished. This is merely a draft. It also fleshes out some of the general ideas you all have laid out before with potential specifics for implementation, such as Atlanta's style of personnel reform, which may solve some of the puzzles that you were discussing earlier, potentially having the mayor appoint a personnel director, put a civil service commission into the public advocate's office, et cetera. And it has different approaches, 2 options to departmental consolidation, as well as how election dates could be phased in, speaking to the parliamentarians' earlier concerns. A few quick features, a brief foreword from Dr. Todd Swanstrom, who you all previously invited to present to this commission. Sample ballot language on page 6, based in part on the language that appeared when St. Louis County adopted its wholly new charter upon repealing their old charter in August 2020, and the major changes that this commission has recommended. As I mentioned, interactive survey linked from the QR codes at the beginning and end. So for example, in your public engagement meetings and presentations, a city resident could scan that and give feedback in real time on their phone, take a 3-minute survey. It includes diagrams, case studies, and other information explaining how city government currently works, as well as proposed changes based on your recommendations. One of my personal favorites is pages 18 and 19, the traffic case study, the failing structure of city government. Again, this is a draft. It has significant contributions from people who've seen these problems you've identified firsthand and agree on many of the solutions. We presented an initial draft of this to our board members, and our team spent all of last week editing, making major and minor fixes. We're happy to connect you with the designer or help facilitate making changes as your recommendations change. Happy to answer any questions. And last note, to save you time later, a poll can be fielded in 10 days, even 7 days or less, as long as you all are clear on the questions that you want to ask. Thank you for your time and for your work.
Pardon me, just a second, Ben. So if we want to have ballot language by what date? 9th? So if a pollster had data in advance of June 30, so they would need to go into the field the final week, or you probably wouldn't want to poll over a public holiday, I wouldn't think, but maybe. But to make sure that ballot suggestions could be provided, it would almost have to be done by June 30th. So you'd need to, a pollster would have to start on, say, June 23rd and be done by July 1st?
In our experience, when we were, for example, putting together Proposition R and retained a separate polling firm, it was very clear when results came back, crystal clear, what had the support and did not have the support to pass. So if you need to finish your language by the 9th, I mean, I would say I would give it 7 days from when you bring a pollster on to when you want results, as long as you go in knowing what your questions, general questions are. And a good pollster will be able to distill those. But you all, the hardest part of putting together a poll or doing anything in politics is working with the client.
Yeah.
So you all would need to be a pretty good client to work with to get an expedited process.
And to date, we've been superb. So so I'm thinking, I go back to the idea that our window to get a poll in the field so we could take information back, digest it, agree, disagree, change, alter, would be July 1st. So it would need to go into the field the last week of the month in order to do that.
Because you want the results on July 1st.
Yeah, so, okay.
Yeah, so a poll would need to be in the field for probably 3 days, usually. And sounds like a public holiday is a non-factor. That's usually a non-factor anyway, in our experience.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so is there any other discussion around what we've just been working through? If not, I will move on to the next agenda item, which is public comment. Our only speaker slip so far was from who we just heard from. So is there anyone else that we need to hear from at this moment? Okay. I will yield the floor to Vice Chair Sheridan now to recognize you. I believe he's still on.
Chair,
Yes.
Chair, I'd ask that you facilitate this since I am remote.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Do you have a mic?
Yeah, is this working?
Yes, can you state your name?
I was blessed with a loud voice, so I probably don't need it any.
Well, just for the internet.
For those who are online.
All right, I will use it. David Stokes, Director of Municipal Policy at the Show Me Institute. We're a St. Louis City-based Missouri think tank. We're based in the Central West End. I'm going to reduce my comments in the interest of time for everybody, for all of you. I know you have more work to do. I passed out my comments. You should all have a copy of it previously. Again, I'm not going to just read everything I have here. I'm going to summarize them briefly and hopefully just speak for 3, 4, or 5 minutes at most. My comments are a little more general about policy areas of interest to us at the Show Me Institute that are also in the St. Louis City Charter. I'm not here to talk about things that are not in the charter. So everything, the 3 topics I'm going to touch on are all touched on in the St. Louis City Charter. And while they are a little bit more general, I'm not really citing specific language. If anything I say you would like me to do that, submit specific language online within the next few days. I know you're on a tight time frame. I would be happy to quickly do that upon any request. I want to talk about 3 things primarily. One is the St. Louis City earnings tax, which is covered in the very first article of the city charter. When I talk about the earnings tax, I talk about, it's like the old line about what's the best time to plant a tree. Well, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. And that's sort of how I view the city earnings tax. What is the best time to have phased out the earnings tax? Well, that would have been several decades ago. What's the second best time to start a process, to consider a process? And I have no delusions that this charter committee is going to end the city earnings tax. But it's a topic I want to bring up. So what's the next best time to talk about making a change? And that would be now. I get it. It's hard. It's an important revenue source. When we talk about 20 years ago to start, when we published our first paper at Show Me Institute on the earnings tax, and I will note that the land value tax, which came up in our discussions earlier, that was the proposed solution to how to phase out the earnings tax, was to institute a land value tax in the city of St. Louis. That paper was done by Professor Joe Haslig for us in 2006. And around that about time, look, I get it. There were buildings in downtown St. Louis selling for $120 million 15 to 20 years ago that now sold for $3 million last year. I get that depending more on property taxes in that environment is very, very difficult, potentially impossible in the short term. But I would just hope that this Charter Commission and others on the city leadership would get serious about trying to move in a different direction, if in no other way than to cease doing changes that make the city more dependent on the earnings tax, not less, such as the property tax freeze for senior citizens that the city passed, and that many counties in Missouri are passing, but that the city just passed several months ago. As politically popular as that may be, that's the type of move that makes the city more dependent on earnings taxes, not less. And I think that would be harmful. And I'm going to get online and look at the exact things about the land value tax that were suggested, because I would believe that those changes would be very worth consideration for adoption in the city of St. Louis, which would probably involve some changes to state law, because aspects of it are unfortunately illegal. Second topic I want to talk about is the water utility, which is mentioned in multiple points in the city charter, including one where it says the Board of Aldermen is not allowed to vote on leasing or selling the water utility. If you want a specific language recommendation from me, I would change that to allow the Board of Aldermen to lease or sell the water utility. And I don't say that as a way to get around the public. I would not suggest doing that aside from a vote of the people, but alongside a vote of the people, to give the Board of Aldermen more authority to consider that. The city of Eureka, just a few years ago, sold its water division to Missouri American Water for $28 million. That's a lot of money for a very small city. Eureka's got about 10,000 people, I think. Clearly, the city of St. Louis, substantially more than that. And my argument would not only be financial, for all the money that would be available for the leasing or the sale of it, but I want to highlight quickly two problems with political ownership and political leadership in the water utility that I think would be addressed by a lease or sale. One, you're all familiar with, it got a lot of attention last year, and I'm not picking on the city water division here, this is common for municipal water utilities. You know, because your customers are also your voters, when politicians are making decisions on how to raise rates, you want to put it off, and you put it off as long as you can till it becomes such an emergency that you have no choice, and then you have to really raise rates substantially all at once instead of modest increases over time. And that's exactly what the city of St. Louis has seen for years, putting off rate increases until you can no longer put it off any further. And that's a common problem with municipal water utility ownership. And I understand, and I know that the Board of Aldermen and the mayor and city leaders, not only did they raise rates last year as they should have, but they did put in an annualized rate increase for it, and they deserve to be commended for that. And that was an excellent move. So that will address that problem. Hopefully that will address that part of the problem for a long time. But I also remember when that was passed last year, that there were already people objecting to the automatic rate increases. It can be tough for people to afford. So sort of the effort to repeal that already began as soon as it was passed. So I hope that doesn't happen. The second problem with public ownership of the city water division is specific to the city of St. Louis, that it really is, I would say, a really bad thing that the city of St. Louis has never officially adopted water meters in many homes in the city of St. Louis. Many homes, not all, but many homes still operate by flat rate billing, and that's a very harmful policy. Water meters could impact water conservation, greater efficiency of where the water goes to, and many other benefits. So just another example of why I think the Board of Aldermen should be able to consider leasing or sale of it is I would like to see water meters installed. And yes, clearly the water division could probably do that on its own, and if that were to be done, that would be a wonderful thing. The final topic I want to bring up as I wrap up here, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak to all of you, is occupational licensing, something that I've been fascinated with and talked about many times. It is discussed in the city charter in great detail, actually. It's in fact one of the longest sections of the city charter. It lists hundreds of occupations subject to licensure in the city of St. Louis. For many of them, the listing there is nothing more than something necessary to do to make it eligible to charge a general business license to that occupation. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not here to object to a general business license. But for dozens of these occupations as well, or several dozen, I would imagine, there's additional occupational licensing requirements put on for people who wish to practice that profession in the city of St. Louis. And as I detail in my testimony here, under the purported benefit of the public good, occupational licensing requirements generally restrict competition, limit entry into the field, and harm consumers. And there are no doubt some examples of that in the city of St. Louis. And I want to get really specific in one example where somewhat strangely, so state law, and I have no idea why this state law exists, but state law gives the city the authority to require an occupational license for architects and professional engineers if they have an office within the city, and not if they don't have an office within the city. What does that mean? It would mean you have an engineering firm in St. Louis County that comes in to do a job in the city. You can't make them have a business license in that case. And somewhat strangely, the city of St. Louis has enacted that authority for engineers, but not for architects. In fact, in the 5 or 6 pages of occupations in the charter, engineers are the only one where it says, employment agencies, engines, engineers when not covered by state license, engravers, escrow service, and on and on and on. And if you're looking for a very specific example of a change to make, and I'm happy again to put this on the online form, to expand that to other occupations that are covered by state licenses, so that you're not having this sort of double dip where they have to do certain things for the state to work in, and then they have to do certain things for the city as well. I think that would improve customer choice, improve options for consumers in the city of St. Louis, make employment options for the people of the city better, and have a number of other benefits. So with that, I appreciate your time, I appreciate the opportunity to speak today, and thank you all for your service on this commission.
Thank you very much. Do we have any commissioners with questions?
I do. Thank you for your comment and your document for us here today. What is your perspective on the zoning language that's in the same article that you mentioned here lastly?
I'm going to have to ask more information. I don't think I'm...
In the business licensing article, there's also language related to zoning, and it's several pages in the charter. Other charters do not have business zoning language or licensing in their charters. There's typically a section there that reflects what the business department or business office does, and that is it. Our charter goes into all of the licensing requirements, all of the zoning requirements, on and on and on. So in that very article that you're mentioning, zoning is also there in grave detail. And based on the presentation we got this year from those of us who understand the Model City Charter, that language is not there. So I just wanted to know if you've seen that and if you had any perspective on that as well.
I do have general comments on zoning in Missouri at the local level. And I do think all of our communities would benefit from a liberalization of zoning, meaning to make it less strict, to make it easier to build duplexes or multifamily housing in more areas of St. Louis City. And I would say this, if I was talking in Chesterfield or Springfield, I'd say the exact same thing. So I do support substantial, again, I would use the term liberalization in making zoning less strict, in giving developers, citizens more options. We talk, in parts of the city, there's neighborhoods that might have a corner bar on the neighborhood, like a little restaurant and bar on the neighborhood. And they're sort of gathering places for the city, and they're wonderful. Oh, it'd be a restaurant, whatever. But, with most of them, if not all of them, probably predate the zoning codes, which is how they're legal there. And yet we've made sort of neighborhood stores, neighborhood shops, generally illegal around the country, but I'm here to talk about the city of St. Louis today. So yes, I think it should be much easier for a wider variety of homes, including apartment buildings and condos, a wider variety of business interests. Nobody's talking about putting an asphalt plant in the middle of a neighborhood, but to allow, small stores, small restaurants, coffee shops, bars, whatever, to increase that in the zoning code to allow for more, that I think would be wonderful for the city of St. Louis.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Stokes. I'm rather fond of your Article 1, which I know is a hot button topic right now with the earnings tax. I am also a person that believes in, we probably wouldn't have a need for a earnings tax now if there weren't TIFs. Yeah, I said the dirty word, so there you go. But I wanted to get your perspective on that because, of course, and while I'm not a math person, I know that when you take away one thing, you have to replace it with another. So do you think that in this, and I know this is just a proposal, but do you think that, I didn't see anything that spoke to TIFs or anything like that, because I know that a lot of those are kind of a problem with that in that regard. So you think that would that also be a way to kind of maybe help with that? Because considering that the earnings tax is what, a third of the city's budget?
Well, absolutely, I think addressing TIF abuse and subsidies. There's a reason when I sort of listed an idea that I put that first, because I think it's not only is it probably one of the most important, but it's probably the one that can be done tomorrow if the Board of Aldermen and others decided to stop giving them out. And as you were to potentially phase out an earnings tax, you have all of that coming back on the tax rolls. And if you stop giving away new subsidies, so yes, I've traveled the state of Missouri in opposition to tax increment financing plans. I can't imagine someone who's done it more than me. Last year I was in Lake of the Ozarks, speaking to the Camden County TIF Board. I've been to Kansas City and Springfield and all over the state. I do think that I would like to see the state legislature dramatically tighten up the allowance for tax credits and tax subsidies substantially. But short of that, I'd like to see cities themselves get far more disciplined about how they do it. And to the point, I'd like to see them not do it. And so I've talked for years, this doesn't apply to the city of St. Louis, so I apologize, I'm just answering the commissioner's question. Talking about how county level TIF commissions have, to some extent, worked better than city TIF commissions. Again, I'm well aware the city is an independent city. But because you have the problem of Chesterfield is only out for what's good for Chesterfield, yet they're giving all this money away that's county money and Zoo Museum District money and special school district money. And obviously, some of that relates to the city of St. Louis, the Zoo Museum District at the top of the list. When a county TIF is passed, that impacts not city government per se, but funding for residents of the city of St. Louis. So I've supported moving to the county level TIF commission where at least the people on it are a little more broad viewed in it. And that has worked to some extent, particularly in Maryland Heights, where about 4 years ago, they shot down a massive floodplain TIF, which would have just been a disaster. But yes, the simple question is, dramatic reductions in all types of subsidies is probably it's the first thing to do to change. And I will say this, I think that should be done even if the earnings tax is kept. There are other reasons to reduce the use of tax subsidies, mostly that you can then reduce, instead of giving special interests a special tax cut, you could lower everybody's rate a little bit for all. So yes, that's very important. And we have, at showmeinstitute.org, we have tons of writing on that.
Thank you.
Do any other commissioners have questions or comments while we have? No?
Thank you for everyone's time
Thank you.
today.
Are there any other speakers at this time? No, you don't have to swear, but we do have to know your name for the record. No, we know, but.
Charles Bryson with TrailNet. I want to thank Commissioner Dwight for bringing up something I had not considered. As you all know, that the TrailNet has been a leading advocate for the issue of a Department of Transportation. There are other institutions, the League of Women Voters and CAPCAR, that have brought other recommendations to you. However, once we have given them to you, we assume they will stay whole in the methodology or the language we gave them to you. But that's not the case. Once those recommendations have been approved by you all for further consideration, it means they will then go to the city councilor's office for refining, defining, and what would end up being language on the ballot, which may end up looking somewhat different than what we originally intended. Therefore, there may actually be a possibility that one or more organizations would actually urge people to vote against the recommendation that is put forward because it doesn't necessarily agree with what the intent originally was. And I wanted to make sure that we all knew the politics of that. I'm not saying that that's not, or actually the Board of Aldermen, now I think about it, because it has to go to the Alderman first, after it goes to the City Council's office, it goes to the Board of Aldermen. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that I'm not sure that we realized what may happen with our good intentions once they got turned into legal language. And I'll stop there, but I just wanted to make sure that you all knew that at some point we may say, that's not what we intended. Doesn't mean you all did it wrong. Doesn't mean that anybody did it wrong. It just is such that the language itself may be something that we have to say we cannot agree with. And Madam Chair, I'll answer any questions you all have.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions at this time?
Two things. First, that language will be available publicly on the 14th, so I hope that your groups would bring that thought to the July 1st public town hall. And then I think that's also a good reminder for us commissioners too, for the work that we have to do post the town hall between the 1st and the 9th, when we have to hand it over to the Board of Alders, is to just make sure our intent is reflected in what the actual ordinance language is.
Thank you.
My question is, have you seen it happen before where the language put on the ballot is in legalese and not in the actual recommendation on the commissions that you've been on?
This is a different ballgame. And so I can't say that I've seen language go on the ballot that I am sure was not quite the intended, but it was for something very specific. This is for all the marbles. And so it's a whole lot more process, whole lot more public facing than anything that I have dealt with previously. And it matters because it's not, some of the things that I've dealt with were, well, one that came up, I know, because of the commissioner behind me, is the one about reducing the Board of Aldermen from 28 to 14. That actually survived. There were other things in terms of ballot measures that survived, but nothing really changed the charter other than going from 28 to 14. This, depending on what goes on the ballot, substantially changes or may substantially change people's lives, both in government and outside of government.
Thank you.
Any additional questions, comments? Okay, thank you. Is it on? Is it on?
It's green.
Yay.
Hi again, Benjamin Singer. I'll be brief, but for purposes of the public comment period, in terms of what you're all considering in the work group 2 recommendations tonight, our request would be to, especially if you are moving the dates of the city elections at the time they're also going to be with the county office elections, to apply Proposition D's rules of approval voting and a runoff consistently. There are some potential issues with state law, but it would make sense to at least seek the city councilor's office opinion on the matter and forward that for consideration to have that be consistent for all city offices, both municipal and county. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, so now we will, are those all the public comments? So now we are going to revisit an earlier motion about prioritizing moving forward proposals. So at this time, I'm going to call on Commissioner Intagliata, and then I'll go in order. So it'll be Commissioner Crossland, Commissioner Dwight, Commissioner Grant, and then Commissioner Nolan Eccles. Mm-hmm. You need your, yeah.
So based on our conversations here tonight, I'd like to make a motion that the commission direct the city councilor to expedite an RFP process using the language provided in my note, which you've all seen, to judge and award a survey by June 23rd. And that we ask her to expedite that activity.
But we want the results back by June 30th or June 23rd?
We want them to award it so that the pollster would have to go out the week of the 23rd and come back with data July 1st.
I thought we said June 30th. That's what I'm confused on dates.
June 30th, July 1st.
Just want to be clear. So we want.
Yeah.
So July 1st.
Yeah.
July 1st.
Second.
Casey.
Okay. So
Yeah.
the motion's been made, it's been seconded
have-
by Commissioner Crossland. We have a comment from
Yes.
Commissioner Milberg.
Yes, I guess I would just want to hear from the city councilor's office as to whether they also agree that that timeline is reasonable and feasible from their perspective. I mean, I think our perspective, just hearing that, even in spite of the comment tonight, does indicate that that's an extremely quick turnaround. And I guess I would appreciate, I don't know, is there any concern from your guys' office about the ability to facilitate something like that within that time frame?
Can someone pass a microphone to Ms. Walsh for her to respond?
Boss is
Or
out
Eddie.
of town.
Yes, but is there someone who can Can you speak into the mic, please? That's okay.
Good evening, everyone. I can't speak to the specifics that are in the RFP process, but there are very specific guidelines with regards to the RFP having to be posted on the city website for a period of time. That's typically 30 days. So there are some things that are very stringent in the RFP process that I believe the commission really needs to understand and know.
I for one, am delighted if the city councilor comes back to the commission and says it isn't possible for this reason or that reason or another reason. I think that it would be a poor effort on everybody's part if we didn't at least consider doing that until we're told it can't be done.
And I believe it was moved and seconded by Commissioner Riley, so we can vote if you'd like. Oh, Commissioner Crossland.
But it's fine, don't matter who it is.
So do you want? Yes.
So, Chair Bobo,
Aye.
the parliamentarian Garth, abstain. Commissioner Crossland,
Yes.
Commissioner Dwight? Pardon me?
Pass.
Pass, okay. Commissioner Grant?
Yes.
Commissioner Nolan Eccles?
Aye.
Commissioner Riley?
Aye.
And Secretary Intagliata, aye. That is,
Vice Chair Sheridan also aye.
oh, I'm sorry, the chair,
Vice Chair.
Vice Chair Sheridan?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Oh, he passed, okay. Commissioner Dwight?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, one abstention and the rest are ayes.
Excellent. Okay, so now we will move forward to, I believe, Commissioner Crossland.
Now I make my motion that we move the draft changes in the document that I presented earlier forward to the next step. The good news is that the language and the sections, et cetera, are pretty much already laid out the way that they would need to be drafted. And so it may take the counselor's office less time to actually work with these documents than they might otherwise.
Which are you proposing to move forward?
The entire
All of them?
document. Yeah, the entire document. And it's not to approve them, but it's to move them forward to the next step.
To get language from a city councilor. It was more than just the next step.
Right.
Yeah, my understanding is this vote moves it into our draft, like our required draft for us to create.
Okay. Do we have to vote on the entire package together?
We can discuss.
We could break it out. It's just the choice of the commission in terms of how we want to do that and the amount of time we want to spend on it. I'm okay with it either way.
Did you make a motion? She did.
But there's not a second.
Okay.
And so from that point of view, if you guys decide you want to break it out and do it piecemeal, I'll withdraw my motion. It's up to you.
I have a comment concerning looking at them as a whole versus breaking them out.
Okay.
Because in the first document, if I'm correct, please correct me, Commissioner Crossland, if I've got it wrong. But if we're referring to the document that you sent out, in which, thank you for going through and doing the red line for me. The first portion are recommendations that are from the mayor's office. The second piece is recommendations for Article 18 and changes in where I believe that they need to be broken out, because the element specifically in the mayor's comments that references the director of personnel position, if that is added to the language there, then Article 18 in itself must be revised to support that recommendation that are going forward, because those two are in conflict with each other right now.
I see what you're saying, but I believe that Article 18 having to do with dismissal has already been revised in the document. It includes the mayor's recommendation there versus the earlier recommendation that was in your document.
Yes,
Now,
ma'am, you are correct, but the conflict comes because the director of personnel position is the secretary to the Civil Service Commission, as well as part of civil service. And so therefore, the language that is written in Article 18, if that changes the scope of civil service and the director of personnel's role in carrying out guidance from the Civil Service Commission. So because being an appointed position versus a civil service position as it relates to the Civil Service Commission are different in all of that.
Well, and it goes further, because should we decide on E&A heavy, the question of civil service and whether it remains in the executive branch, et cetera, changes as well. Go ahead, Commissioner Grant.
Can I propose, let me offer my ideas on this, because I've given a little thought. is so we are faced with a deadline to publish a draft on June 14th. A draft is a draft. It doesn't mean that it's final. It doesn't mean that the language isn't amendable by us. In fact, it must be, because we have to take public input afterward. So there's obviously some expectation that it will change. So we also are faced with problems with just logistical issues with the city councilor being able to draft these proposals. So we also, what the director is just mentioning is there are some unavoidable internal inconsistencies between some of these proposals, which we're going to have to resolve ultimately. But I don't think that prevents us from drafting proposals that we can look at. They'll be published on the 14th. We'll look at them on the 17th at our meeting. We can talk about them, and then there'll be a public hearing on July 1st. So I've thought about 6 bundles for potential drafting, which if I could have some latitude just to talk about for a moment, which I think would be within, based on what's been drafted and discussed so far, based upon conversations with the city councilor's office, that I think would be possible logistically to draft.
As a point of clarification, these bundles include not just what we've discussed tonight, but what we discussed last week as well? Because we forwarded certain items last week as well. And the question that I have is still how all this relates.
I don't know what you're exactly what you're referencing, but I would propose 6 bundles, and I've linked them to their ideas, but also linked to amendments that have in the spreadsheet that's been circulated. So the first would be what I would call the member Crosland's proposals, which relate to a little bit to the mayor's office, a little bit to contracts, a little bit to personnel, a little bit about removing obscure provisions. Those are represented in what Member Crosland circulated today, and I think are encompassed in proposals that Work Group 3 made about updating contract language and eliminating like the Malamphy fund, and so those would relate to amendments on the spreadsheet 24, 27, 26, 28, 29, 42, and 44 through 48. Those are all essentially bundled either as part of Anna's proposal or things about purchasing supplies and notice in newspapers and things like that. So that would be bundle 1 for the city councilor to draft. Bundle 2
It would be a procedural kind of bundle we're talking about.
Yes.
Okay.
So bundle 2 would be pronouns. That has been discussed. That's number 20, amendment number 25 on our spreadsheet. That would be done as a second proposal be drafted. Bundle 3 would be moving municipal elections, including the primary and the general, and also initiative and recall, to an August and November schedule. Presidential, yes. Yes. That is encompassed in amendments, proposals numbers 1, 2, and 3 on the schedule. So, bundle 4 would be the various proposals relating to the Board of Aldermen's budgeting authority, the abolishment of E&A, and the creation of the public advocate and the Department of Finance. Those have been previously proposed as amendments number 30 and 31, which were then recast as options 1, 2, 3, and 4 that I just discussed earlier. So that would be a bundle. The next bundle would be a Department of Transportation. That was in proposal number 43 on the spreadsheet. And then the 6th and final bundle to be drafted, which is practically done, would be the proposal on collective bargaining and the right to organize, which is amendment number 50. So that's how I've thought about it. I think that's within the.
To clarify, where would any personnel changes fit?
No, other than what you've submitted, no.
So the ones that I've submitted are here, but we
That would
don't
be
have
part
a,
of, that's what but what, the full scope of the proposal that the director presented, which I think she had concerns about not being fully vetted, not submitted, nor
right. And so I went back to basically the core that she was talking about. And the issue then is the mayor and the relationship of the personnel director, which is in conflict with what the personnel director prefers.
there's an, yes, so, but that would be what would be, we direct the city councilor's office. I mean, it's what you have presented today would be what would be drafted. Now, again, all of that could be modified, amended later.
Yeah.
But
Well, because
have to tell, we
I
gotta
think
get something.
none of this is, as you say, set in stone. What we're doing is we're trying to articulate in a way that makes sense so that we can in fact present it to the public and get feedback.
Yes. So I understand our requirement, our obligation to present a draft. That'd be a good faith effort to apprise the public as to what we're considering, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't have to be a final product. And we want input to make it better, but we have to give them something to intelligently consider.
So I agree, but as an example, we have 4 options for the Board of Eaton. So we have to at some point make a decision about each line item is what I'm suggesting. What is a part of each bundle? So I think we need to go line by line with each of these to say yay or nay, to be a part of the bundles at 6 or 7 that we create.
So the issue is there's some inconsistency between those 4 options, those bundles, like whether we keep the comptroller, whether we sunset the comptroller, who has the authority to review contracts, right? But we've got to present something to.
But isn't that the same decision that Commissioner Riley is saying that we should vote on?
Yes.
Yeah.
I suggest we go line by line and take a vote.
Okay.
Would it make sense, based on the bundles that you just mentioned, to try to organize those prior to our next meeting on the 17th then, and to do the line by line then, so that we see how it all fits together in the bundles? Or should we do it now? I don't know. I'm just raising
think
that question.
The problem would be that by the 14th, we have to publish.
Right.
So I
So
wonder if
really-
we go
No.
line by line and we use these bundles as a directive for how the counselor organizes the language. But I kind of agree that we probably have to go one by one.
Well, I believe that the city councilor has already done work on these.
He has.
Maybe the city council, they could provide us a little.
Yeah,
I mean,
insight.
I would want to make sure all this is logistically possible.
Yeah. So,
Well, didn't we, the last
Bob,
meeting, didn't we went line by line for most of what's here?
Right.
There's additions to what Commissioner Carlson is saying, and we have other commissioners to recognize related to recommendations that aren't present. So what you're requesting is going line by line for what wasn't reviewed at the last meeting? Or are you saying review them line by line, all of them again?
I think again, because now we're advancing them to the city councilor.
Okay.
We've all considered them, but may not want them to move to the next step, which is.
Right, this is the vote to put it in our
Correct.
draft slate.
Right, and that was why I was concerned about whether we were going to look at the total number of items, including the ones we dealt with previously, or just the ones we were looking at tonight.
I feel like
I move that we,
the ones that we have today are new and technically different from the ones that we already voted on. So really, we're just adding to what we've already agreed upon at this point, rather than going line by line and rehashing.
I guess one of the questions, I'm not sure about this, but one of the questions might be, were there things that we decided last time to move forward that now, as we see the bigger picture, may not be as relevant anymore? I don't know.
we can just vote them down if we go line by line.
So as far as I can tell, given our last conversation on the 29th, I believe that the items we discussed tonight, which would be Anna's proposals, the second oversight idea that Commissioner Dwight put forward, the 4 options on E&A, one of those 4 that Commissioner Grant put forward, and then there are third-party recommendations that it seemed like Commissioner Nolan Eccles had. So it seems to me that those are the 4 items we should vote on and decide if we want to send any of those.
In addition,
drafting.
correct.
Yes, yeah.
Right, because in our May 20th and then again on the 29th, we approved 14 bundles at that point. So I feel like it would be a poor use of time to go over what we've already voted through up to this point. So now we're just discussing what we're adding to what's already been approved at this point. So
So
now the question becomes, do we want to piece it out of what you just said, or do we want to do it?
Well, one of the questions I would have would be whether the commissioners have any particular items within the document that they would like to pull out and vote on separately. It might be, rather than going through it item by item, is it possible that there is concern about specific items or a desire to discuss and vote on them separately, and then we might be able to vote on the balance as a bundle to be able to expedite the process? We can go either way, but that's one option. For instance, if there's a concern, if people want to discuss and decide on the whole question of does the mayor appoint or does the HR director remain in civil service, then maybe we discuss that, we vote on it, and we deal with that, and then is there enough in the rest of it to...
So I'm sorry, Commissioner. So what you're saying is, as it pertains to the bundle of recommendations you brought tonight.
Right.
Okay. So you're saying you don't want them.
Oh, no, I'm saying we could go either way. We could go through each one of them, or if there are only a few that that people wish to discuss in more detail and vote on separately, then we could go ahead and pull those out and deal with them individually and then vote on the balance. It's up to us either way. I'm simply presenting 2 options.
The thing with going line by line is there's so much overlap and redundancy in the chart. And I mean, we can, but I think we're just creating a lot of work.
Well, and that's why I'm suggesting maybe that if there are specific items of concern or that people want to talk about, that we could discuss those individually and then deal
I
with
would
the
feel a
balance.
lot more comfortable if we voted on the entire package up or down, quite frankly, that you brought, because we will be here forever having probably not very productive conversation about specific items. And we've done this a number of times on these topics. I think it's okay to vote for them up or down, all of them.
So I guess I have a different process in mind. If we do all agree, we can very easily call for a previous roll. Without discussion, if you vote nay on an item, we simply say nay and move forward to the next item. But to assume that we all agree on every proposal, I don't think that will be clear to the public as to where we stand on items that are listed here or have been presented so far. The things we've advanced to discuss, I don't want to move forward to the city council or part of individual buckets, but to go through each one and pill out, we could just very quickly go through and establish consensus, I think, but perhaps it may take more time.
I do have one comment I believe will help the commission as it relates to Article 18, because that seems to be the elephant in the room, just to put it out there right now, regardless to that. Just one point of information for the commission to consider in your vote And of course, me as the Director of Personnel support whatever the commission says that it believes is best for the city of St. Louis. With that being said, there was one point that I just did want to clarify for your consideration in this, and that is that the Director of Personnel position currently, as it is structured, the mayor appoints and the mayor also has to make the decision to terminate. The process by which you go through is just different for civil service versus being appointed. Being appointed, you serve at the pleasure of the mayor, new mayor comes in, he or she can change however they want to. The position is protected by civil service because of the sensitivities around it and the issues that it has to, and the charter is very clear that it has to remain free from political influence. So with that being said, I think this will help you in your decision-making one way or another, but I am completely comfortable with however the commission votes and however the commission believes that it should move forward on this particular issue.
So I have a point of order. I disagree, Director Gray. I don't believe the elephant in the room is a particular article. I think the elephant in the room is how we're proceeding and what the process of proceeding forward with the additional articles that we have not voted on is. So if we could go back to the order of the day and determine which articles we're going to put forward for discussion, that would eliminate the confusion. So I am calling for the order of the day at this time.
Okay, so Commissioner Crossland,
Should we begin? Should we
Yes.
begin at the beginning?
Sure.
And I guess I'll just.
I just want to say this, though. I would hope that this is, I'm hopeful, crossing my fingers. This is the one that I believe is perhaps the most contested or the most deliberated out of some of the other batches that we've discussed up to this point. And so I hope that we can turn our listening ears on and tune into what's being said so that we can expedite this portion of it.
Parliamentarian Garth, just a question so I understand this. I plan to go through by article and section. And I guess the question is, can it simply be a yay or a nay, or do we have to vote on each one, or how do we deal with this if we're going to do this?
So the thing is, and I feel like someone asked for the time, or we're up here telling people how the clock works.
Yeah.
Let me be very clear. My understanding of where we are right now is just to discuss what's going to be sent to draft so that it will be put into legalese and then discussed at public hearing.
Right.
That was it. I don't know how we went on 270 just across the street.
Yeah.
So here we are. This is what I'm going to say. I think,
A call for order of the day.
so as I was saying, what we need to do, I like what Commissioner Intagliata said, whereas we've already gone through the line items, we've already done all of this. It's a simple thing of yay or nay, are we going to move what we discussed to legalese and then move forward with getting it published, and then it goes to the public, and then that's where everything gets deliberated there, where we start going by line by line. It doesn't need to take all this.
Yeah. So at this point, can we just do the entire document that you shared earlier? Maybe make a motion about that, and then we can move on to each other commissioner that has.
Back to where we were. I make a motion that we move the draft as presented this evening forward to the next stage, which includes preparing a draft for our public hearing.
Second. Okay, the motion has been made and seconded. Chair Bobo?
Aye.
The parliamentarian Garth?
Aye.
Commissioner Crossland?
Aye.
Commissioner Dwight?
Aye.
Commissioner Grant?
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan Eccles?
Aye.
Commissioner Riley?
Aye.
Secretary Intagliata, aye.
And Commissioner Vice Chair.
I'm sorry, Vice Chair Sheridan.
Aye, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we are going to move to Commissioner Dwight, who I think mentioned the civilian oversight among a few other things.
So the civilian oversight language, I motion to move that forward and that the counselor's office adapts it depending, is true to the language, but adapts it if we move forward with a public advocate.
Second.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded. Chair Bobo,
Aye.
Parliamentarian Garth,
Aye.
Commissioner Crossland,
Aye.
Commissioner Dwight,
Aye.
Commissioner Grant,
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan Eccles,
Aye.
Commissioner Riley,
Aye.
Vice Chair Sheridan,
Aye.
and Secretary Intagliata, aye.
Mm-hmm.
It's late, please help me. What were the other specific things that I brought up earlier that we would vote on at this point versus as part of others?
Well, right. So some of what you mentioned might be part of public advocate or ENA, but I'm not sure. Do you
So
remember?
Then perhaps since it's something that we already voted forward, which was this bucket of elections calls, but we had a public comment asking to amend that to add that those county offices also fall under the approval voting structure. I would like to move that we amend or add that into the language.
Second.
So add that to the election package.
Add that to the election package of language.
So motion, previous roll?
Aye.
Aye.
I didn't hear Vice
Aye.
Chair.
Aye.
Vice Chair Sheridan?
Aye.
Thank you.
Question, wasn't there also a recommendation to abolish any positions that were not required or mandated by the state constitution? I'm trying to remember.
As a part of his?
As a part of mine, things that I said.
I think it was
Not
a
that I
separate
said.
recommendation that we received. Right.
Okay.
So we're gonna, okay.
I don't think that, maybe it'll happen later, but not under mine. My other things were related to the public advocate and a Office of Community Engagement, as well as I think there was a proposal around Civil Service Commission existing under the Office of the Public Advocate. So we can talk about that later.
Okay.
I think that's everything I talked about.
Okay.
But it's late.
Commissioner Grant.
Okay, I want to make sure we've covered. So we have an elections package already.
Yes.
We have the various budgeting ENA public advocate package already passed.
Yes, but we haven't gone through
Okay.
there's 4 or 5, or no, I think 3 different.
That was like a special item that we
have
still
Right.
needed to
Voted on the 4
discuss.
options you brought forward earlier, Chris.
But like the rest of our recommendations from our work group were approved
Okay.
before.
So I would move to have the city councilor draft proposals relating to numbers 30 and 31 on the spreadsheet, which have been recast as options number 1 through 4 on budgeting, abolishment of ENA, and the public advocate position, and a consolidated proposal.
So your option 4, as put forth earlier.
Oh, options 1 through 4.
Right, but I thought that you gave 4 options and 4 seemed to cover everything.
Yes, I think we have to draft all 4 for proper.
No, I think we can decide on which option we want and only have that one be drafted.
Just draft.
I would suggest that we narrow it. 4 is
Well,
nice, but not necessary.
Draft a consolidated option.
yeah, which is 4,
But
right? 4 is the
we're gonna-
consolidated option.
Yeah.
But that will require, if, for instance, the public, we realize after public comment that we don't like the consolidated option, require extensive redrafting.
I think that's what we
That's
have
okay.
to do
Yeah.
for maybe several things.
So then I would propose then that we draft option number 4, the consolidated option.
That's heavy.
Related to Board of Aldermen budgeting authority, abolishment of E&A, and creation of a public advocate with sunshining of the comptroller.
Second.
Can I offer a friendly amendment? Amend it, yeah.
Oh,
We love friendly amendments. Go ahead.
That as part of the duties of the public advocate be specified that one of those is an office of community engagement.
so we would amend, I would agree to actually an amendment which would include in that the officer of community engagement under the public advocate. And I'm not sure, I think we could also talk about the public advocate having, and I'm not sure, Commissioner Dwight, if you want to have the public advocate with the power to provide legal services in support of independent commissions.
Yeah, my understanding is that we approved my amendment earlier that said that bodies that have that independent, what is it called, like investigative, role for the government would have that. So we would say that the public advocate is that department body.
All right, so then with the amendment to add the officer of community engagement within the public advocate's office.
Option 4 plus.
Okay. Yes.
Perfect. Okay. The motion has been made and seconded. Chair Bobo,
Aye.
Vice Chair Sheridan,
Aye.
Parliamentarian Garth,
No.
Commissioner Crossland,
Aye.
Commissioner Dwight,
Aye.
Commissioner Grant,
Yes.
Commissioner Nolan Eccles,
Nay.
Commissioner Riley,
Aye.
and Secretary Intagliata, aye.
My next motion would be to authorize the city councilor's office to draft a charter amendment proposal for the creation of a Department of Transportation. And that is consistent with proposal number 43 on the spreadsheet.
Just a
Second.
question of clarification. That's in line with the recommended language from advocates?
Yes.
Oh,
At our last meeting, she said they were already doing that, I thought.
Well, I think we have to actually authorize, they have not been fully authorized to draft it yet. I think we have to go through all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Second.
Did someone second that?
Second.
Okay.
All right, so that's a motion.
Mhm.
Is there a second?
Two.
Yes. There were
Commissioner
two.
Riley did first.
Several seconds.
Great. Okay. Chair Bobo,
Aye.
Vice Chair Sheridan,
Aye.
Parliamentarian Garth,
Aye.
Commissioner Crossland,
Aye.
Commissioner Dwight,
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan Eccles,
Aye.
Commissioner Riley,
Aye.
and Secretary Intagliata, aye.
I
I think you have a third one, right?
No, what's that?
I think you have an additional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I had authorized the city councilor to draft a proposed charter amendment to address pronouns in the charter and also to change the title of the Board of Aldermen to the Board of Aldermen.
Second. Previous roll?
Aye.
That moves it through.
Can you repeat the question? Can you repeat the question?
Sorry?
The question, can you repeat the motion?
That's it.
Can you repeat the motion?
Oh, yeah, I repeat the motion. That I would authorize the city councilor's office to draft a proposed charter amendment that would address pronoun usage in the city charter and to change the title of the Board of Alder people, or aldermen, to the Board of Alderpersons.
Is it my understanding that that is already, like, things that aren't crossed out on here are already authorized?
Is it?
Right, I mean, they're drafting them, so are they probably finished drafting them? It doesn't really matter.
Madam Chair, if I may. the-
Yes,
This-
please.
Already had a charter
It's the
amendment.
publication of these on
The
June.
Board of Alderpersons. I think the suggestion was to change it to a city council.
They're going to have drafts.
Chris, did you, Commissioner Grant? Commissioner Grant, so Director Ingracia mentioned that actually the recommendation was to change it to city council instead of alderperson. Did I understand correctly?
Yes, we've already had a change in the charter, changing alderman to alderperson and the Board of Aldermen to Board of Alderpersons. And I think the conversations that I've been a part of would change the board to a city council.
Okay.
Would have council members, which avoids the pronoun issue.
Okay, so I don't, I mean, do we not need a motion? I want to make sure this is done correctly, so.
Or withdraw
Yeah.
the city councilor drafting this stuff last meeting.
I was not sure. Is that the case, that the city councilor's office is already drafting these provisions?
And it's already been done.
Okay, already been done, okay. 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 So
You can withdraw the motion.
then my remaining would be, because I'm not clear on this, so the proposed amendment on the right to organize and collectively bargain, that be
That's-
drafted and included in the draft for publication. But has that already been done?
No, this is new.
Proposed?
Yeah, this is new.
Yes. Then I would propose that.
Okay.
Second, the previous roll.
No debate.
Right.
I have a question related to the motion. You know what? No, I withdraw my question.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And those were yours, correct, Commissioner Grant?
Do the motion again?
No. I was saying those were the ones that you
That's it,
brought.
yes.
Okay. And then finally, Commissioner Nolan Eccles, do you have additional ones you'd like to add for consideration?
Yes. Bear with me. I can show you. My first motion is I move to include the language of all members of the public within the public amendment submission form and third-party amendment document in support of the proposals that we are moving forth for language drafting.
Okay, just so I'm clear, how is that different from how we've incorporated their public comment thus far into our proposals?
Because as we heard here previously, the language specifically from the members of the public is what they're asking to be drafted or to be included, and they want to understand that that specific language is within our proposals as presented.
At least speaking on our work group's standpoint, my understanding was that it wasn't like literally people could submit to the form and that would be accepted as a final
Right.
language. It was, the commission is intently listening and is going to listen at our work group, and we considered at least the ones that applied to our areas, and they've made their way as we saw fit into the final language.
Well, early on in the commission process, we agreed by way of Commissioner Riley's motion to have members of the public complete amendments in article form. And that is what this document reflects. They actually did recommendation forms.
Right, and we've incorporated, up to my knowledge, we've incorporated to the best of our ability. Do we have a second? If not, the motion doesn't pass. Okay.
So I'm still on I will go line by line and make
Okay.
sure that they have been appropriately considered and for the record. So as I did earlier, I communicated that the members of the public have submitted article recommendations and submitted forms by way of our website that have specific article language in which we have not considered, in which we have not put into our recommendation forms. And I am asking that we consider them. There is, for example, a pay parity request to be removed from Article 18, coming by way of the police association that is listed here, that we have not voted on or included in any article. So that is why I'm asking that the recommendations from the public, as listed and as submitted by the public, be considered for full consideration.
So you're asking that everything that's on spreadsheet proposed public amendment document be moved forward?
Yes. Half of them are for the Department of Transportation, the other half related to the mayor's article, and a subset related to Article 18.
So we've already approved the Department of Transportation one, but I haven't heard a second on your recommendation or on your motion, so.
Yes, and it's still my turn to speak related to my recommendation.
Right, but has anyone supported that?
So I guess just for me to be clear, is the motion, because something's already been approved, which lines?
Right.
So the line items that have not been approved or discussed or added is line item 10 through 20 on the spreadsheet. 10 through 20 on the spreadsheet. And if you consider what we received today, 6.3 and 3.1. So I will rephrase. It's item number 10 through 23 of the public comment article recommendation submission. You see it? The motion is to consider and move forward items number 10 through 23 of the public comment and public recommendation and amendment submission forms.
Okay. Do we
Item
have,
number 10 through 23.
do we have a second?
I will second.
I don't understand what move forward means.
Yeah, I don't.
So the recommendations
Yeah.
are just like our recommendations. The public had the opportunity, by way of Commissioner Riley's motion early on in the process, to submit what they believe their article recommendations are. Members of the public have done that, and I'm asking that we consider those recommendations as well as our own.
So just so I understand, you mentioned these proposals 10 through
23.
They're so. But are you proposing that those be drafted by the city councilor as proposed amendments?
Yes, if they are not supported by the current language we already have. So if, for example, the taxes and elections and all of those recommendations we already have, we would simply adopt the language or add the language. The articles that we do not have language for, I would like for us to adopt and support.
So I think what I hear is, go ahead.
There, you can look here, Commissioner Grant. Go ahead, Commissioner Riley.
What?
Commissioner Grant, I have them up on my screen too.
I think what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we've talked at length about public engagement and the lack of public engagement in the early part of this process. And the public has finally sent us recommendations. We have not voted on what they sent us. And so to be true to form, if we ask for their feedback, we need to give them feedback, what they've given to us.
Yeah,
I'm hearing.
Commissioner Riley, I think that the challenge is that that language, many of the subject areas that have been covered are actually integrated into a variety of different
Exactly.
amendments that we already have at this point.
Precisely.
And that clearly language, we want to be aware and careful that we include language that doesn't conflict with, for instance, a transportation advocate's position, but they are not separate amendments that need language in all cases at least. And so do we, have we already, they have helped us to formulate what we are developing now, but they may not be standalone in and of themselves.
Correct, but your opinion is that everything the public has submitted has been addressed in what we already talked about. That's the issue. And if it has not, what has not been discussed should be discussed, is what she's saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying. If the members of the public have submitted article recommendations, which the Charter Commission staff have reviewed, if those recommendations are not reflective in the existing recommendations we've put forth, I would like them to be considered. And I know that at least half of them, like I just explained, item number 10 through 23, have not been discussed and voted on by this body.
Okay, so it appears it's been moved and seconded, but I believe, Commissioner Grant, you want a little bit more time to?
So I am concerned that this would pose a tremendous burden. I don't know how the city councilor's office.
Discussion or debate down here too.
Yeah, I just don't understand. Like I appreciate these comments for the public, and I think we've considered these ideas, but
I agree.
we have to draft something, and you have proposals in here, which is like create a city manager. I mean, you're talking about a comprehensive rewrite of the charter. And I don't know how, I mean,
We considered that.
I don't know if the city council has got time to do.
And we had a speaker about the city manager. So it's like we're redoing things and doing so inefficiently, in my opinion. But we can vote because it was seconded. Mm-hmm.
Motion has been made and seconded. And just so I'm clear,
On our internal document.
the motion has been made and seconded. I'll call roll. Chair Bobo.
Nay.
Chair Sheridan. Parliamentarian Garth.
Absolutely not.
Commissioner Crossland. No. Commissioner.
No.
Because we've seriously engaged public comment really deeply, nay.
Thank you. Commissioner Grant.
Hey.
Commissioner Nolan Eccles.
Aye.
Commissioner Riley.
Nay.
And Secretary Tagliaferri.
Thank you. My next item is.
I'm sorry, was my name called to cast a vote?
It was.
I didn't hear that through the microphone. Could you please, I'm voting nay.
Thank you.
Point of
Next
order.
item that I have to.
Point of order.
Yes.
Commissioner Intagliata, I've had a couple of requests that you use a mic when you speak so that the public can hear you.
Oh, when you speak, can you use your mic so that the public it's behind your screen.
In the future.
Thank you. So that one does not carry, or does not pass. Nolan Eccles, did you have others?
Yes, on the last meeting, the Charter Commission staff have confirmed that some of my recommendations from early in the year were not included in the spreadsheet. And for the record, those items are now reflective minus, I believe, 2, numbers 32 through numbers 41 were my total list of recommendations given the updates. So I move to consider numbers 32 through numbers 41 for full consideration and drafting by the Charter Commission staff.
So we need a second first, or can I ask a question?
Yes.
You can. Yeah, you can have a discussion.
So some of these items have been addressed,
Yes.
Yes.
some have not. So again,
Some of them were not.
okay.
And that has been sent to all of us. Yes.
Microphone.
Commissioner, could you say again what you're addressing here?
In the bundle we have, the Charter Commission staff has updated my recommendations as several of them were left off of the original packet from last meeting. And those recommendations are items number 32 through items number 41. Those are my original recommendations.
Okay, so there we go. And it's been in there for a while, and that was revised February 27th, correct? That's what you're talking about?
Yes, that's what I sent originally, February 27th. I sent my total recommendations. When this was compiled, some of them were missing.
Okay, so you're moving that we accept and move forward for drafting items 32 to 41 in our combined spreadsheet.
Yes, now that they've been updated by the Charter Commission staff.
Okay.
Could we revise that to only those articles which have not been, items that have not been addressed?
Yes.
Because I can imagine if I received this packet from
Mhm.
City Council, in the City Council's office and have redundant.
Yes, I am
items.
okay with that amendment. So the motion is amended to include the recommendations that were left off of the compiled form that I put forth in February.
Not hearing a second. Okay. Next, do you have any others, Nolan Eccles?
No, thank you.
Okay. Well, I believe, let's see, I think we have to go back to Commissioner Dwight because he checked some things.
I bring some bad news, but news that we can work through.
Okay.
And I have a plan for how we can work through it. There was a little, I think, misunderstanding on what we did authorize.
Mm-hmm.
That decision that we made in mid-May was to move things forward for discussion, and it was an effort to eliminate things.
Mm-hmm.
Our votes today that we authorize things for the final draft is what actually counts.
Mm-hmm.
So we do actually have to go back to those things that we've moved forward before and authorize them. Unfortunately, however,
Can we do it in groups?
we can do it in groups. That's exactly what I'm about to say. We can do it in buckets because the way that we did it, that we haven't changed anything that last day except for those special consideration items. We've already voted our special consideration items, so we can just vote the rest of them.
Okay.
Authorize in the final slate.
I'm going to say yes for the sake of time, and I'm on board with this, but I also want to say for the record, there are things that I advanced in our working group that I thought could be discussed that I don't think should move to language. So for example, at-large seats, which is in here.
That was
as a
mine
group.
as well from that
That's
first.
why I'd rather just go line by line, but I understand for the sake of time, we don't want to do that. But there are many things I want to really say no to, which tonight I may say yes to for the sake of getting it to comment.
So how about for this first bucket in work group 2, if people have their things out, I move for us to authorize the non-crossed out line items here,
Mm-hmm.
except for the at-large, which I propose we have a separate motion for.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8.
13, 14, 15, 16.
14 only.
Oh, sorry.
13 and 14.
14.
That's it. Yeah, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 13, 14.
Why stop there?
15.
Because that was work groups 2.
There's some additional ones on this accounting that we have today.
Pardon me?
There's some additional ones.
Point of order.
Yes.
I thought there was a motion on the floor that Chairwoman Nolan Eccles made.
It wasn't seconded.
Did somebody say it failed?
Oh, it failed.
Failed.
The motion failed.
Sorry, I'm just trying to keep track of
Yeah, no,
what's
totally
happening.
fine.
Thank you.
Page 7 of our packet.
So we're here.
1 through 6.
1 through
8,
6, 8,
13 through 16.
13 through 16,
So
and then 18.
1 through 6,
Yes.
8, 13, 14.
15, 16, 18.
Yeah, I thought we had agreed that the legal department, the council at large, and the budget by July 1st reversion didn't get full acceptance. So I only had 13 and 14 on the Board of Aldermen reform. If we want to put the
I
other ones
believe
on there, that's
we
great.
voted
So,
this-
so re-
Yeah.
just really quick. I'd like to recognize Director Christina Gracia for a moment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to remind folks that I feel like this is a very different conversation than we had at the meeting last week about picking like a handful of things that we knew the city councilor had time and capacity to draft. And so if you're going to move forward with approving draft language to have presented to the public, I think you need to figure out possibly who is going to draft that language if the city councilor's office doesn't have the capacity. I feel like she was pretty clear last week that she was kind of already getting to that point with some of the work that had already been, you have been interested in moving forward. And this is just a lot to add. Thank you.
Commissioner Dwight.
It feels to me like what we if we only what we authorized today, which I just checked, it leaves some holes from our intent.
Okay.
I'd be willing to reach out to resources such as the WashU Law Clinic and others that have done drafting before for additional support, but it's also a choice if the commissioners want to not move some of these things forward.
Can we go back to the bundles Commissioner Grant mentioned and discuss what those bundles and what that language could look like? It seems feasible for us to do language in that way.
That's what we're
I think
doing.
in essence, that's kind of what we're
That's what we're doing.
I think you maybe bundled a couple of them in different ways, but am I right that in essence?
Mm-hmm.
I guess maybe we need, I just really, I see conversations happening.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and now we're going through items again. I'm not quite sure why we're passing number 14 when we already passed for something like 14. I'd like to know what.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to know what information the city councilor's office needs from us to make this the best proposals, the best processes possible.
Basically, it's just if we move forward with how we are, these issues won't be included in the draft language. And if that's what the commission is good with, then we can move forward. But as of yet, we haven't authorized these in our final slate that we haven't discussed today, is my understanding.
Well,
Let me make a motion to authorize numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 13, and 14. So it's been.
I will second the.
Okay, thank you. So it's been,
Great. Okay.
I will second the motion.
thank you.
My earlier point around discussing or going line by line again is simply that I was in a work group that created these suggestions. I voted for it to move forward. In our testimony from the Board of Elections, we talked about the challenge with an even number year and the length of the ballot. And the option came up because of cost, et cetera, to move to odd number years, very simple change, which we have not been able to discuss here. But we're just going to move forward with this. So again, for sake of time, I'm fine with this. But the things we have not discussed these things. We just discussed to move them forward. We voted to move them forward. So that's why I keep asking about a line by line about particular things. We can move forward with this, get the public's feedback, and move to the next step. Again, I renew my second.
And I do think that is fair, and I think that is what we said we would do on the mid-May meeting. I propose that that's what our 17th meeting is about. We'll have already had the public language. It's not our final that we're submitting to the Board of Alders. And maybe the 17th we can work through any issues that there might be.
So,
Commissioner Riley, I guess I was curious about what, looking at those and moving to the even years, what the perceived merits were of that, as opposed to keeping it in odd-numbered years.
We did not suggest that one was better than the other, but simply that the August-November timeframe would be better. And we just went with even because of the presidential election and the amount of, with the voter turnout being higher in those years. We had not fully discussed moving to odd years.
Okay.
So are you saying your work group did not make final decisions on the recommendations here, and there still needs to be finalization before we can vote, or what are you saying specifically?
We voted to move these recommendations forward for discussion and to hear the merits based upon our testimony with the Board of Elections as to whether it's fully made odd, even, March, November, August, November, et cetera. So this is a final recommendation, but it could be altered based upon those small details. So what I'm hearing the commissioner say is we want to move forward to get public comment, and we'll tweak it later because of our timeline. That's fair. That's fair.
did we?
I renew my second. Call for a vote. Can I do that? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 13, 14, and 18.
I'm totally confused at this process. Number 14 is something that we already approved. It's budgeting. So if we go through this line by line, we are going to be creating a ton more work. Why are we doing that? I'm really perplexed as to
Well, there may be some in here that don't fall into some of the approvals that we already have made.
That's the
And
issue.
so if we could just move a little faster, maybe we can discover that. I've already looked at the group 3 recommendations that are here on page 8 of the packet, and all of these appear within the document we agreed to move forward earlier tonight.
so we
So
can
we don't
skip-
even, we can just let that one go.
I just don't want to create redundancy.
Can I make an amendment to my motion? And that's to remove 15, or which one did you say it was?
18.
18. Is that the one that you said we'd already done? Or which one did you say we'd already done?
14, he said.
The ones that had already been done are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 13, and 14. I believe we are adding 18 to it from Commissioner Riley. I believe that is what we were voting.
Okay. Do we have a second?
That just confused.
I don't believe that's the case. So we voted to move these forward for consideration. We are voting to move them forward to the city councilor for drafting.
Right.
I'm suggesting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. Everything but 15, 16, 17 should be drafted. It's already moved forward. They'll recognize redundancy and they won't draft it twice.
Okay.
Commissioner, just in light of the previous conversation, it sounds like the more important element of numbers 1 and 2 wasn't so much, even versus odd, as much as April to November and August. In light of that, just given that it doesn't sound like there was a ton of compelling, logic dictating moving, to even, from odd, would you be amenable to an amendment that keeps, April to November and keeps August, but removes the of even years, the addition of that language?
Yes, but I thought the commissioner didn't want to go line by line, so I didn't suggest that.
Okay.
That's why I keep going back to line by
There
line. We
be-
can see redundancies, skip them, and move forward.
Point of order.
Okay.
There are 5 motions on the table. Pick one and vote on it.
That's ridiculous.
Was there a second to the one that someone just,
I believe at least a couple of them have seconds already.
well, which one was the first?
I'm gonna withdraw and restate my motion.
Okay,
Motion is withdrawn.
okay.
To clarify before I do it again, the ones that we've already voted, what did you say, Commissioner Grant? What was that one? 14? And then 15, 16, 17, we were saying, are not included? Okay. I move that we authorize for our final slate and therefore for the counselor to write recommendation language for 1 through 6, 8, 13, 18.
Second. Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. Chair Bobo,
Aye.
Vice Chair Scher,
Aye.
Parliamentarian Garth,
No.
Commissioner Crossland,
Aye.
Commissioner Dwight,
Aye.
Commissioner Grant,
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan Eccles,
Aye.
Commissioner Riley,
Aye.
and Secretary Intagliata is an aye. The ayes have it.
All of this next bucket has already been authorized.
Okay, Work Group 3 recommendations for full commission discussion. Items 19 through 27 have all been, agreed to be moved forward as part of our previous document approval.
Excellent. Can you just repeat what you just said?
Items 19 through 27 are all included in the document that we voted earlier to move forward for prep.
No.
Was 23 included?
Please use the microphone.
Yeah.
I don't know why we're going back through this.
Right, it's all there in a
Right.
form in that document.
Was number 23 included?
Yes.
No.
Point of order.
So.
Yes.
So what I would say, what I would recommend,
Quick, point, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to be really clear, when you're making your motions, you need to say that you're requesting that the city councilor's office draft language, prepare language, and that was not the motion that was made earlier. So
All right.
we're getting really confused.
Let me go back and say.
Finish really quickly, Commissioner Crossland, I apologize.
Oh, sorry.
I want to make sure that when we come back to work tomorrow, that we are able to have a full understanding of what you want us to do.
Absolutely.
That's fair.
Okay, then I make a motion that the Work Group 3 I make a motion, actually, let me go back to this earlier one. I make a motion that the proposed draft changes Crossland notes, which were presented earlier in the meeting, be moved forward for final language draft preparation from the city councilor's office.
You'll have to have somebody who voted on the prevailing side make a motion. And
Motion to
then,
reconsider.
Motion to reconsider, second.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
hold on. So we're going back to direct the city councilor. What?
I think it's, unfortunately, we kind of really bumped
Yeah,
up.
we jumped over something earlier because we weren't familiar with what the language should be.
Okay.
So now we need to go back and do it so we can move forward.
All right.
Was it seconded?
So we have, yes, David
Okay.
seconded.
And we can do roll call, yes? Aye.
Can we get a consensus that we're just trying to move the recommendations forward for article recommendation writing, correct?
Yes, we're just trying to make sure that they have the authorization
Right.
to write everything they need for our
That's it.
draft.
Right.
Full draft.
Okay, so if Secretary Intagliata can call the roll, we can get through this one and then get back on track.
What is the motion?
The motion is to, the motion is to now I forgot, what did we call it? To restate? No. Reconsider, a motion to reconsider. We have to, we have a second on the motion to reconsider, and now we have to vote on that.
And then I called roll call, right? And,
Yeah.
and it's been passed. The motion
So the next one
Right.
is,
And so now I have to say I make a motion to move the proposed draft changes, Crossland notes, revised 6/124, forward for drafting by the city councilor's office. Okay, is there a second on that? Someone?
Second.
Okay, so Dave, okay, there's a second.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. Chair Bobo,
aye.
Vice Chair Sheridan,
Aye.
Parliamentarian Garth,
Abstain.
Commissioner Crossland,
Aye.
Commissioner Dwight,
Aye.
Commissioner Grant,
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan Eccles,
Abstain.
Commissioner Riley,
Aye.
Secretary Intagliata, aye. Passes. Madam
Thank you.
Okay, and in those circumstances, then, Work Group 3 recommendations for full commission discussion, numbers 19 through 27, have already been approved.
Excellent. Commissioner Dwight?
We now have to do this for everything again,
I think he's double.
Yeah, I'm checking with the staff right now.
Okay.
This is all just to make sure.
Yeah, no, I get it. We want to have our bases.
Alignment on what we want. I think just we have to get it for the record.
Okay.
Number 28 was already voted on. Send to the city councilor's office to draft.
Okay.
Requirements here and throughout the document require all public publishing in 2 daily newspapers,
Oh, perfect.
including electronic public postings, which can be 6 per se.
Excellent. 21 has been covered. 29 has also been covered. E&A, we already did. We did Commissioner Nolan's recommendations. We did Department of Transportation. So now we're to Work Group 1. We did Transportation. We didn't do 42, so we didn't do the rest of these in Work Group 1.
In the meeting minutes from last meeting, they're also outlined in here too, if you need to reference them.
Oh, awesome. So I motion for, on page 13 of our packet, in Work Group 1's recommendations, number 42.
Point of order.
Yeah.
Numbers 22 and 23 failed at the last meeting.
That's why they weren't considered this time, because there's language.
Yeah, we didn't vote on those.
So you made a new motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I do a point of information, Commissioner Dwight?
Mm-hmm.
In the last meeting minutes, would it be easier for us to just move the items that we've had approved that are itemized in here today for drafting of language? Because they're outlined in our meeting minutes.
I only have like 4 more to do, and then I'm think I'm done
Okay.
for having everything be authorized.
Thank you.
Confirm, give me like 5 seconds, and then I think we can do one last motion.
Yeah, I'm good with that. Thank you for your due diligence. Appreciate you.
So my motion is to authorize for. Go ahead. I motion to authorize for the city councilor to put into draft language and to be included in our draft slate items 42. We already did 43, 40, and 48. So 42 and 48.
42
and 48.
Is that your motion?
That is my motion. Yeah,
You might as well.
farm and
Okay, it was seconded. Let's vote.
And let's vote.
Let's vote. No, we already voted. Yeah, let's,
Do you want to amend?
no.
42 and 48 is my
Thank you.
Okay,
are authorized for final language and part of our draft slate.
motion has been made and seconded. Chair Bobo,
Aye.
Vice Chair Sheridan,
Aye.
Parliamentarian Garth,
He had to leave.
the Commissioner Crossland,
Aye.
Commissioner Dwight,
Aye.
Commissioner Grant,
Aye.
Commissioner Nolan Eccles,
Aye.
Commissioner Riley,
Aye.
Secretary Intagliata, aye. The ayes have it.
Okay. So our our very last thing is adjournment?
I do have
Second.
one question.
Thank you. Oh, yes.
One question, just because I was not here at the last meeting.
Okay.
My ignorance. The document proposed here is a very short document. Are we asking for a proposed revised charter from the city attorney, or for this language outlined?
No, that document was purely a draft. It was premature to have been brought here tonight. That is not germane at all to this conversation.
That's
my
not
question.
our
No,
language.
it just, they pulled things from various places.
That's not my question. Are we asking the city attorney to draft a full version of the city charter, or to give ballot language for the city charter? What did we ask her to do last meeting? That's what I'm asking.
We have asked her to create a draft charter.
Okay.
We won't need to finalize ballot language until we send it to the Board of Aldermen. Right?
Yes, that's my understanding. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
Yes. Second, I think we already seconded.
Okay, great.
Roll call.
Aye.
Yay.
Aye.